Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Welcome, everyone. This is going to be a great day. Thanks for joining us today with BioDesign, exploring Canada's strategic position as a key contributor to the global bioeconomy. I'm Megan Seagrave. I'm going to be your host for today. I'm the Executive Director of Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, and one of the members of the BioDesign Conference Committee bringing you this fabulous virtual event. I'd like to take a moment just to introduce the other members of our illustrious committee, Kelly Forbes-Wilson, Andrea Hands, and Mehdi Sheikhzadeh from Lambton College. This has been kind of the primary team that has put this event together for all of you. So thank you to them. And I'm going to go over just a few housekeeping rules so that you understand what the agenda is going to look like today, how we're going to work through it, and we did factor in a break, so we want to give everyone at least 20 minutes or so for a bio break, lunch break, grab something, and then have you come back. So we've got 3 panels where I'm going to introduce each of the speakers, who are going to take 15 minutes to talk a little bit about their organization, and then the panel topics that we had put out to them. Then we're going to open up the floor to some Q&A for about 20 minutes. So please, I believe you're all on mute. Please keep yourselves on mute. We're hoping that this is going to be dynamic in nature. If you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A and direct them to a specific speaker if that was your intent, using the chat feature. We'll capture them all, and during the Q&A process, we'll try and answer as many as we can. And if we run out of time, again, we'll grab them all. So we've got 3 panelists for you, 3 panels for you, and each panel has 3 panelists. The first panel is the National Bioeconomy Strategy. Might be of interest to some of you to know that Canada is one of the only OECD countries without a national bioeconomy strategy. So we thought this was going to be an interesting topic with some of our panelists and some of our guests. Second panel is about building an industrial bioeconomy in Canada. What does that take? The third panel is going to be pathways to success. For those of you who work in the bioeconomy, you're likely familiar with the opportunities and the hurdles, and this panel is going to talk to you about what they have seen and experienced. It's about what's really happening out there. Again, this virtual conference is positioned to share and showcase some of the great work going on here in Canada, and to provide a mechanism to highlight opportunities to connect via each other so that we can knit things together cross-sectorally, this wonderful patchwork quilt across the country, and build a stronger bioeconomy. After panel 2, we're going to take a short break, a bio break, 20-30 minutes. We'll let you know depending on how quickly we are running this morning. And then we'll resume with the very last panel. All right, so I'm going to see, I don't see Sandy's name up here yet.
Megan, I think she's in the attendee list, so just give me 1 second. I think I can just change her role and we should be good.
Right. Sandy.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry, Sandy.
Yay.
We did it. There we go.
All right. So welcome, Sandy. Sorry if you were having some hurdles this morning. So I'm going to introduce you, and then Kelly's going to help you run through your slides, unless you've got control of them. Are you?
No, I think it'd be better, Kelly, if you just advance them for me.
Okay,
that would be great.
You'd like me to do them for you, Sandy?
Yes, please.
Sure.
So it's my pleasure to introduce Sandy Ferguson, Senior Advisor, Bioeconomy Initiatives for Foresight Canada, and a colleague of mine as well. So Sandy currently works as an independent forestry and bioeconomy advisor, drawing on her background in senior corporate affairs, business development, and strategic roles with private, not-for-profit, and government organizations. She provides consulting services at the strategic, tactical, and interim senior management levels. She's currently a senior advisor for Foresight Canada, a clean tech accelerator for the BioNEXT program and the bioeconomy sector BC Net Zero initiative, pardon me. Previous roles include Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Conifex Timber and Director of Marketing and Business Development at the BC Bioenergy Network. She served on the 2018 Federal Resources of the Future Economic Strategy Table and is a board member with BIC, Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, and the Canadian Bioeconomy Conference and Exhibition Society. So welcome, Sandy.
Thanks so much, Megan. Okay, are you going to pull up the slides, Kelly, for me? It's a real pleasure to be here. BioDesign, as many of you know, has been running for a number of years, not always annually, but certainly the activities and work that were leveraged out of the BioDesign initiative and the Bioeconomy Industrial Strategy continue. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. Okay, great. Thanks so much. So I'm going to provide a bit of an overview around the forest bioeconomy, and my fellow panelists will be talking about different aspects of the bioeconomy. And we will not forget the ag bioeconomy, which I'm sure will be covered off in some of the other areas. But my particular area of focus over the last year or so has been around the forest bioeconomy. So that's where we're going to start you off. So please go ahead, next slide. Okay, I thought I'd just, because I was the first speaker, I thought I would just set a bit of a stage. And if we think about what is the bioeconomy, I always like the definition that comes from the International Energy Agency, and that is the industrial bioeconomy is the production of products and materials from the sustainable processing of biomass, trees, crops, residue, or dedicated grasses and algae. Or a really quick definition is bio-based products are lower carbon alternatives to products conventionally derived from petroleum. And in Canada, we have had a number of, I believe, very powerful strategy papers that have been released. One being the Canada's Bioeconomy Strategy that was put together by a group of private and not-for-profit entities after probably all told about a year, including consultation across the country. BIC, FPAC, FP Innovations, and BioTalent, I believe, were the four founding organizations, but many partners contributed to that. And that was done outside of government, but with some government involvement. The biorevolution, many of you may have read the McKinsey report, very powerful. They predicted 4 trillion between 2030 to 2040 from the bioindustrial revolution. That's a very significant amount, and at least half of that is in the industrial bioeconomy. And then from the government side, we've had 2 frameworks released, one on the forest bioeconomy through the Canadian Council for Forest Ministers, and the other an update. Now, I will say I would really like to see those move into being strategies at some point, but for the time being, at least it has pulled together some of the work across Canada, across all provinces in the forest sector. Please go to the next slide. Okay, so who is Foresight? How do we play in this space? It is arguably the largest clean tech innovation and adoption accelerator in Canada. Fairly significant metrics that we've had over the last number of years, very focused around the clean tech space. But within that, and please go to the next slide. And sorry, our goal, Canada is the first G7 country to reach net zero. So we call that a big audacious goal. I'm sure all of you in your organizations have that as well. Next slide, please. So how do we think we're going to get there? We look at it very much from the total ecosystem perspective. We foster collaboration, try and break down silos, and provide action-oriented supports to accelerate clean tech innovation, adoption, and export growth. Next slide, please. So we're clean tech focused and sector agnostic across our accelerator programs, but we have started to move into doing some focused work in specific sector areas. So you'll see these up here: AgriNext, BioNEXT, BuildNext, WaterNext, PowerNext, and CarbonNext. Now, you could jump to the conclusion, and you would be very right in saying, well, the bioeconomy kind of covers many of these areas. BioNEXT is a 6-session series focusing on bringing together our ventures, emerging technology companies, with the bigger ecosystem, funding partners, success stories, suppliers, and partners. But we could say that the bioeconomy touches a little bit on all of these areas. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show you this value chain, and you can go onto our website and look for a copy of this if you're interested in more specifics around the report. There's some basic information on the website, but you can also request more details. And you can see it's a pretty exciting technology value chain here in Canada that we have, starting in the forest with forest operations and going right through to the end users on the other end. And boy, those are very small, aren't they? They're cool icons, but I have to put my glasses on. So we can go right across to where the end users, whether they be in the chemical industry, the agriculture industry, the built environment, are all using these products that move through a value chain that adds value, economics, and also, let's remember, some really significant climate change mitigation strategies. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we kind of looked at what's going on across Canada, we came up with 141 companies by province. These are specifically the innovators, not necessarily all of the supply chain players. You can see which areas they're focused in, and it gives a nice snapshot of where we are today and where we maybe need to build, where we can leverage, where we already have some strengths, and maybe where we have some gaps. Next slide, please. All right, so the other initiative that I'm involved with at Foresight is called the BC Net Zero Innovation Network. And part of the BioDesign recommendations were around strengthening supply chain and getting better cluster building so that we can pull together all the partners across the supply chain more effectively and more quickly for end results. So our objectives, this is a BC focused program, but we do work across Canada with particular partners who are part of the overall value chain. But we're really looking at supporting the Clean BC plan. So those of you who may have dialed in from British Columbia are well aware BC has been a leader in the area of GHG reduction strategy and planning. We call it the Clean BC plan. There's a number of elements that flow below it. And it really is focusing on GHG reduction and economic development through advancing the forest bioeconomy. Sorry, that's the BC Ensign initiative. Clean BC doesn't just focus on that. It covers many, many, many parts of climate planning. We're looking at developing collaboration and clusters between SMEs, industry, academia, government, investors, and Indigenous partners. And I think those of you who are involved with the bioeconomy are well aware that we need all of these partners in order to successfully advance and also compete with what's going on globally. Next slide, please. So a number of the activities we can support through the BC Ensign, strategic and tactical support, innovation challenges, where we bring in generally large strategics who are looking for solutions for their own supply chain. I think Foresight has done over 100 of these very successfully. Ecosystem mapping and value chain analysis that I just shared with you earlier. Venture acceleration cohorts, which I spoke about, and First Nations collaboration and support, typically with innovators, bringing them into and also leveraging their own innovation within the communities themselves. Investment opportunities, feasibility studies, grant writing, and events and conferences. Next slide, please. So What kinds of things you're probably interested that we're working on that can help support the bioeconomy? We have two projects with a group that's already in and of themselves a cluster. That's the BC Pulp and Paper Coalition. We have continued the very good work of our partners and friends at CRIBE, based in Thunder Bay, who have done a lot of work around the lignin space. And we have commissioned a report from AFRI to look at opportunities in lignin and end-use markets. So kind of expanding on the work that was already done by CRIBE and looking at some more detailed information around where might the best opportunities for us to focus our efforts. Secondly, we just started a carbon benefits to support fiber utilization. I think many of you are aware that we have extremely strong and robust conservation carbon benefit programs, both in Canada and internationally. What hasn't been looked at enough, and we feel it was an area that we could show some leadership, is around carbon benefits in active forest management. What are some of the things that we can do that can help reduce GHG? And also promote a healthy and resilient forest in the process of active forest management. And how can we get some of that currently uneconomic fiber that may be sitting in slash piles or in dead and diseased trees? And we're really excited about getting the first phase of that underway. I keep having, I hope you're not seeing all these Outlook messages that keep coming up. Secondly, we have a wood fiber insulation manufacturing cluster that's just getting started. I think many people are aware of the benefits that wood fiber can use in insulation above and beyond what we have currently for petroleum-based products. Quesnel is an area in central BC. We think of it as northern BC. There's a tremendous community and economic development group there who has been working probably 3 or 4 years to see where they can go beyond just forest bioeconomy, or sorry, forest traditional operations. And we just finished a BDO risk rating and thinning project. Southern Ontario slash building pilot. And then, of course, we have a host of events. So please go on our website. You'll find all of these. Megan, am I seeing you now because I need to speed up? No, I'm good. Okay. February 29th, we have something called Climate Connections, where we're bringing in a sustainable packaging company to talk about what they're interested in and where they've seen some of the challenges in accessing wood-based sustainable packaging. It'll be open to academics. We anticipate there will also be a number of companies and innovators there. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's working well? What do we have in Canada that I think is helping us along the path to accelerating the bioeconomy? I would say we have some great de-risking programs. So most of you who are involved with forestry or woody biomass know that NRCan has a terrific program called iFit. It's been running for a number of years. Thankfully, it got some funding over the next 3 years. We hope it will continue. It has an excellent team of people who are there to provide support in helping get more of this innovation and commercialization in the forest bioeconomy moving forward. ISED has a very large program focus for scaling up. And then, of course, regional development agencies have started to provide support, and they are a supporter of our BC Ensign initiative. Export Development Canada, not only do they provide financing and funding, but we have found them to be quite helpful in introducing partners, global partners, because we don't just need to work within our Canadian ecosystem. There are also large multinationals who are very interested in what Canada has to offer. We have the 30% investment tax credit for waste biomass, and we have some provincial programs. BC was a bit slow off the mark, but we're really pleased to see last year the BC Jobs and Manufacturing Fund was announced, And I'm sure many of you across Canada, Ontario has some great programs. Quebec, special shout out. You're doing great things around supporting your bioeconomy. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the accelerators. So this is very key early stage funding to de-risk further development. Foresight, of course, is one of the players. Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, Natural Products Canada. You'll hear from our next speaker, Shelley, about what they're doing. And then, of course, other investors and funders, as you start to scale up more, people like the Business Development Bank of Canada, and of course, VCs who play an important role. Next slide, please. Okay, hurdles and challenges. I think it's important that we also talk about what we need to think about in order to make this journey more effective for us. So we all know commercial development and scale up are very formidable tasks. They're not easy things. It always takes more time, money, and knowledge than expected. And I have had a number of success stories speak at our events, and they always talk about how much longer it took them than their original planning. So you can expect that. We really do need to think, though, more about developing across the entire value chain, from the beginning where the feedstock is all the way through to integrating the end user markets and the end user companies and customers. We need more certainty from our government mandates for developers and investors, and it needs to be predictable, stable, and long-term. Running a mandate for only a couple of years doesn't provide the predictability that our ecosystem needs. We need more education on bioeconomy benefits for Canada, and a big shout out to BIC for all the work that they have done over the last number of years, where it's not directly in their mandate by virtue of all of the expertise and knowledge they've gained working with companies. They've been an indispensable source for both government and the private sector and not-for-profits. We need to make sure that the forest bioeconomy sector is addressing concerns and communicating effectively. The ENGO community justifiably has a role to play in calling to account many sectors around, are they actually effective in GHG reduction and climate planning? And I think we have a very solid story, but it's not always effectively communicated. We need to spend more time there. And then I was asked to talk a little bit about the national bioeconomy strategies, and I think we'll get into this more in the Q&A. So 60 other countries have national bioeconomy strategies. Why not Canada? We have an amazing natural resource platform to leverage off, and it seems to me kind of staggering that we don't have one yet. We really need, beyond the strategy, an all-of-government approach. You only have to look to countries like Finland, Sweden, which are small powerhouses, as well as the United States, which recently last year announced a White House all-of-government mandate. I mean, a tremendous pull for the bioeconomy. You know, provincial differences and priorities do challenge development of a national strategy, but I believe they can be overcome. And some of the initial work that's been done in the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers proves that out. Next slide, please. Okay, that was it. Thank you very much. This is my contact information, and also my colleague, Jacob Atherton, who is manager of the Bioeconomy initiatives. Please feel free to reach out, and I look forward to hearing from the other presenters. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Bye now.
Thanks, thanks so much, Sandy. I'm going to ask Kelly to put the next slide up for our next presenter, and ask Sue if she can turn her camera on, and I'll do an introduction. And I'll mention again, as you're putting questions into the chat, I'm actually copying them into another document. Thank you for aligning them with particular speakers, and hopefully we will be able to go through them during the Q&A. So welcome, Sue Quillen. Sue is the VP Strategy and Partnership with Natural Products Canada, Natural Products Canada is a powerful catalyst for over 1,500 early stage naturally derived products and technologies. It helps to develop and de-risk these innovations through its high experienced team, international network of industry and investors, and suite of non-dilutive capital programs that provide up to $350,000 to address common challenges such as team, technology, and financial models. Sue has spent the last 25 years helping Canadian innovation get on the world stage. She's responsible for Natural Products Canada's strategic initiatives and key relationships that advance Canada's natural products industries. She's the quarterback behind MPC's special projects, including the recent fermentation report and events that connect MPC clients with investors and industry partners. So welcome so much, Sue, as part of this panel, whose presentation is going to pop up. Sue, you can share your own slides if you'd like.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Taking a second to load up.
There we go. We can see them.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for putting this event on, and thanks for having me. And I wanted to send regrets on behalf of Shelley King, who was supposed to be here and unfortunately at the last minute was not able to. But it's really great to be here, and it's really great to see so many familiar names in the list of attendees. I feel like this would have been really fun in person, but nevertheless, we're here digitally. So listening to the Sandy speak and going over some of those slides, I think you're going to hear a lot of the same kinds of themes. So I'm going to try to focus in on the areas where there's a little bit of difference and not to bore you with repetition, but I think it's really important to recognize that, you know, we're all kind of feeling the same thing and seeing the same sorts of challenges and opportunities here in the bioeconomy. And it's great that we have a lot of overlap in our messaging and that we're, you know, that helps to underscore the fact that there is already a lot of alignment and collaboration across Canada, which I think sets us up well for really digging into and seizing the opportunity that is here. So I wanted to focus on a couple of the strengths that we see here in Canada. And, you know, there are a lot of them, but these are some of the key ones that we see. So first of all, I think everybody on this meeting will know that we have significant access to biomass, and that's a huge thing in terms of being able to take a look at this huge opportunity in the bioeconomy. We also have some really strong primary sectors that have not only the biomass, but have the expertise and the willingness to be sustainable and responsible in the management of those resources. And that cannot be said about all parts of the world. I think we also have a really highly skilled workforce that continues to grow from the fact that we have such fantastic education establishments here. And we all are, of course, seeing an expanding bioeconomy and with the interest that has been there in the last decade or so. We've already talked about the fact that this is a pretty gigantic opportunity. These figures are already a little bit old, but we do see that this is well more than a $1 trillion opportunity. I think, you know, 2 trillion and 4 trillion have been thrown around, but we looked at specific areas that we were really interested in. So bio-based approaches to water and waste treatment, food production, animal health, and human health, and bioproducts and sustainability. And just looking at those sort of green bio-based markets is well over $1 trillion market. And of course, you already heard Sandy talk about the fact that there's a few reports like the McKinsey report and some of the work that has been done or announcements that have come out of the US in the last little while, that this really is a viable, huge opportunity that's in front of us. So we know that there is that competition because, as Sandy said, there's over 60 countries that have bioeconomy strategies. We've got this $2 billion commitment to biomanufacturing and a whole of government approach that the US has that really does put them in a interesting and positive position. But I think we also have to remember that we're not just trying to seize a market opportunity, that this really is about shifting to products and production processes that ensure the health and survival of the planet. And that's not really optional. So we really do need to get serious about this. So what's the challenge? You've already heard Sandy mention the first national bioeconomy strategy that was designed to establish clear roles for government to provide the environment and infrastructure necessary. And, that was a positive first step, but we are all here today because we know that we need to do more. Canada's bioeconomy needs to be recognized as a national priority because we are lagging behind on that implementation, and we need to be able to develop and build that national framework that draws in the provinces and territories in a way that moves beyond what can be silos. And as I said at the beginning, it's really great that organizations like the ones being represented here today, not just on this panel, but throughout the entire day, already are having very strong collaborative relationships, and that is going to be key to moving these things forward. Nobody can do it on their own. And then a really important one is the industry and financial investment markets that really need to recognize the tremendous potential that is here and the unique challenges that come with this kind of industry. So approaching the implementation of that is obviously not a simple task. It's complex and difficult. It's never easy. If you've tried to do anything nationally, it's never easy, but really nothing worth doing is simple. So what can we do? There's a lot of things that we can do. Some of the things that are on our radar are really tapping into that constant stream of highly skilled talent that we have that can support the SMEs that we work with. And I'll tell you a little bit more about our work in a minute. IP protection and regulatory framework that can really be helpful for those companies. The whole of government commitment, as has already been mentioned, and patient capital to deal with, again, the sort of longer nature of the development of these companies. So at NPC, we're doing our part by focusing exclusively on bio-based companies in the early stages of their life cycle. So like Foresight, we're also sector agnostic. So we help companies that are developing bio-based products as diverse as food and feed ingredients to bioresins and sustainable fibers. And we work with companies that are employing a lot of different kinds of technologies, including fermentation and cell-based agriculture and things like that. We have a network of nearly 4,000 stakeholders. Not all of them are in Canada. We do try to have a lot of sort of tentacles out into the rest of the world. And over 1,500 of our network are really those early stage companies that we're trying to support. So we provide that support through acting really like a strategic angel investor. We provide capital, we provide expert advice, and we provide a lot of connections. Our team really is fantastic. We are small but mighty, but we have a really good team that understands the challenges that come with trying to start and develop a bio-based company. So they provide a lot of hands-on advice and really work with companies to determine what is their next best step and what can we do in terms of providing them with either capital or advice or strategic connections to help them to get to that next step. We also have areas that we call our innovation hub and our cluster building initiatives, where we are trying things like events, hosting our own events or leveraging other events, producing reports, that kind of thing, to help showcase the innovation that is here in Canada and encourage those connections to the international industry and investment community that are looking for those kinds of opportunities. And I think one of the things that needs to be said too is that you're seeing a push towards investors looking for these sustainable opportunities. And a lot of that is actually coming from industry, as they are being encouraged by government, and in some cases forced by government, to adopt more sustainable practices. So there are a lot of really significant challenges that have been put out, and promises that have been put out by major industries as they try to use more sustainable sourcing processes and get sustainable ingredients into their companies by 2030, 2050, 2060. There's some very, very ambitious goals there. And so there's a tremendous opportunity for Canadian companies to meet those. So since we started in 2016, we've been really happy with the impact that we've been able to generate. We've invested $6.3 million, which is really not very much, into 75 early stage companies. And those companies have created 306 jobs and have attracted more than $400 million in follow-on investment. So that's an additional $64 for every dollar that we've invested. And I think it's worth pointing out that 75% of that is actually from the private investment community, whether it's Canadian or foreign. So that's one of the things that we're really interested in and do a lot of work to do, is to try to bring in that private capital to those companies, because it is a gap in Canada. Another thing too that's also interesting, and a lot of you will know if you're focused on sort of the innovation issues that Canada has had, the companies that we've been able to support have increased their exports by 52%, which is always a big number that people are looking for. And they've increased their R&D spending by 35%. So that's also another a good indication that some of the work that we're doing is helping. So I wanted to give you some examples about some of the companies. As I said, we've got 1,500 clients, so we have so many that we could choose from. But I wanted to kind of make some of the kind of numbers a little bit more practical. So CanBioSyn is a company we've been working with for a few years. They create species-specific probiotics for animals, so really helping to solve that challenge. Everybody by now knows that probiotics are really great. The gut health, great for gut health, and gut health is so important to the overall well-being of humans and animals. Before CanBioSyn, a lot of times probiotics for animals were actually human probiotics, which obviously, when you think about it from a scientific perspective, doesn't really make much sense. So CanBioSyn was actually one of the first companies to get probiotics from the species itself. So their first products were using probiotic from the gut of wolves, and putting that into their product for dogs. And the results have been fantastic, and they've expanded that into now beyond companion animals into production animals as well. So we've been able to help them over the years. And I think it's really key, because our approach is to really focus in on companies and really not just try to provide them with grant funding or any kind of capital and just move on to the next one, but really keep working with them step by step as they grow and develop and figure out what they need next. And CanBioSyn's a great example of that. When we first met them, we were able to give them some advice on the capital raise that they were going after. We were then also able to introduce them to some potential investors who did end up becoming investors. We've been able to introduce them to strategic advisors who have been advising them along the way and really helping them to grow and develop the business. We've been able to introduce them to distributors that have helped them expand their network and get their products into new markets. We've been able to provide them with capital to expand their team, to do proof of concept testing on their new product development. Many, many things that we've been able to do for them because we've worked with them on a real almost day-to-day basis. It's more like probably month-to-month basis, but really looking in, okay, what is your challenge now? What do you need next? And bringing in that right expertise or connection or capital to help them along the way. And it's having really great results. Another excellent example is Dispersa. So they're transforming food waste into biosurfactants, so green chemicals that can be used for cleaning and personal care industries. We've supported them with capital to scale their products so they could get enough samples to provide to a prospective client. That's so important for companies at this early stage. It helps them to secure clients, and also in many cases secure additional capital, because a lot of times the investors are looking to see, do you actually have potential clients that want this product? So if you can't give them enough of a sample that they can test it and say yes, they want it, you can't get that PO, and it's really hard to get that capital. So this is a great example of where we've been able to help a company with that kind of challenge that is so typical for this stage. Another excellent example is Bass Fiber Tech. They're a company out in BC. They're creating sustainable products using fibers generated from crops like hemp, which are regenerative, so really helping to restore the soil. And they're turning them into things like, compostable wipes, and really looking into other new fibers and fabrics and materials and applications that can be used. So we provided them with early investment, which also helped to secure other investors around that capital raise. They've expanded into facilities in Europe and the US, and they're partnering with many different companies on developing products with their sustainable fibers. So they're doing really great. So a lot of times the development and de-risking that we do, it has this multiplier effect. And I showed you the general numbers, but when we look at it on a company by company basis, it's actually even more impactful. So when we look at all of the companies that we've worked with, on average, the companies are having substantial increases in jobs. So over the 3 years after we've been able to invest, they've increased the number of jobs by 121%, and they've been able to increase their revenues by over 1,000% in that 3-year period. So it really goes to show that the right kind of advice, the right kind of connections, and the right kind of capital at those early stages can really make the difference for these companies in being able to get over those hurdles and get to that point where they can be adding out their teams, building out their teams. Often sales teams are really important there, but also the talent that they need to address their scale-up facilities, that sort of thing. And then with that comes that additional capital of those investors who are really looking to see, does this team have what it takes to take it to the next level? So with all of that being said, the promising outcomes that we have seen, we definitely keep zeroing in on the gaps, the challenges and gaps. We know that we need more skilled talent for these companies. All of these companies need to make sure that they have the right kind of people to help them build and grow out their companies. We also know that manufacturing infrastructure is a challenge, particularly at the scale of what an early stage company is looking for. They are often, almost never able to go to the full manufacturing level because they're dealing with much smaller order sizes. So they're not able to get in on the manufacturing capacities that are out there typically. So we really need more manufacturing infrastructure that is stage appropriate for these early stage companies. We also need to have more capital providers that understand the timeline. You're just not going to get the returns that you would maybe expect in other industries like software or other more sort of traditional industries. It takes a little bit longer. But obviously, as you can see from some of the examples, it's really worth it. And then along with sort of the private capital needing to be patient, we do need, more public funds that are able to sort of provide that extra support to the companies, because we don't have the same kind of private capital pools that we have in other jurisdictions like the US and other places. So we need to make sure that we are supporting them with that non-dilutive capital that's coming from some of the government sources. One of the things I'll mention here is that MPC, we did 13 investments off of our balance sheet, but what we really saw there was, okay, we've got this potential, we really need more of this capital. So we actually spun out a private for-profit investment fund called Nadera Ventures. It's a $50 million fund. They have the same investment thesis as we do, bio-based, early stage, right across all the industries, but it has to have that bio-based component. The other thing I'll mention is in terms of that manufacturing infrastructure, that was one of the key things that we found out when we did the fermentation capacity report that we put out last year, where we looked at what was happening with our clients, and we could see more and more they were having difficulty finding that fermentation capacity. So we did a report, looked at where the capacity was, because we were seeing that that was a risk, because many companies, many of them funded by, Canadian or provincial governments, were having to go elsewhere to find that fermentation capacity. And a lot of times it is just much easier for them to move beyond that, move their company elsewhere. So we're losing some of the companies that we've already invested in here in that early stage because we don't have that manufacturing capacity. So I think I'm really getting close to the end of my time, and I do want to thank you all for your patience and your attention here. We really believe that if we go together, they say if you want to go fast, go by yourself, and if you want to go far, go together. And we think we can do both. We think we can go faster and farther if we all work together. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Sue. Really appreciate that both you and Sandy were not only talking about the great work that that both your organizations are doing, but talking about the great things that are happening here in our backyard, as well as the challenges. So we're not just focusing on the challenges. And I've captured a lot of questions, so I will ask those during the Q&A session. But right now I'm going to introduce Michael Dorrington. So thanks for turning your camera on, Michael. Dr. Mike Dorrington is the Manager of Strategic Partnerships at Ontario Genomics, a not-for-profit organization that leads the application of genomics-based solutions across key sectors of the economy to drive economic growth, improved quality of life, and global leadership for Ontario. Mike received a BSc in Life Sciences from the University of British Columbia and his PhD in Infection and Immunity from McMaster University before completing a postdoctoral fellowship at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in Washington, D.C. As a manager at Ontario Genomics, Mike works with the researchers, companies, and other partners across industrial biotech, health, agriculture, food throughout Ontario and beyond to bring innovative genomics-based solutions to the world's most pressing opportunities and issues. Mike also heads up OG's Bioeconomy, training, and talent development portfolios, including the Waste Can Create Waste Upcycling Consortium. So welcome, Michael, and looking forward to your presentation. Take it away.
Awesome.
Go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, you can see that, I assume?
We can.
Awesome. All right, good morning, everybody. So as Megan mentioned, my name is Mike Dorrington, and I'm Manager of Strategic Partnerships at Ontario Genomics. I'm super honored to be here this morning to talk about some of my favorite topics, including how the study of DNA is vital to the success of the world's and Canada's bioeconomies. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak this morning, as well as all of you in the audience for your interest and for your hard work in making Canada a leader in this space. It's truly an exciting time for the biological sciences as we forge new paths forward and partnerships with new industries. So first up, a little bit about who we are at OG. So we're based in Toronto and we're established in the year 2000. Our mission is to lead the application of genomics-based solutions across key sectors of the economy to drive economic growth, improved quality of life, and global leadership for Ontario. Our vision is to enable healthy people, a healthy economy, and a healthy planet through collaborative genomics innovations. We work to achieve this vision through a combination of subject matter expertise, partnership and ecosystem building, access to funding, and things like program development. And we have a significant focus on building public-private partnerships, especially between academic institutions and industry. Now, we do all of this within the context of the Canadian Genomics Enterprise that's made up of our national counterpart, Genome Canada, and the other 5 regional genomics centers. So those are Genome BC, Genome Alberta, Genome Prairie, Genome Quebec, and Genome Atlantic. This kind of distributed enterprise model allows for each of the genomic centers to focus on regional strengths while also contributing to national impact. And I think it's a great kind of model to follow as we try to connect pieces across the Canadian economy. So together we fund research and implementation activities across a multitude of important economic sectors, including health, agriculture and food, forestry, fisheries and aquaculture, the environment, including conservation, energy, and mining. So basically anywhere you find living organisms, we will be there. So I don't think there's much doubt that we are living in one of the greatest eras of human history. Technological and societal advances have allowed for record low poverty and famine, increased life expectancies, and unrivaled global connectivity. However, we're still facing enormous challenges when it comes to improving the lives of all global citizens, with three of the greatest being the ever-accelerating climate crisis, global food insecurity, and acute and chronic disease. These are all multifaceted issues of extreme complexity and interconnectedness, and no one solution will be able to confront them effectively. Especially when it comes to the climate crisis, humanity is really at a tipping point where only significant further technological advancement, coupled with deep societal change, will allow us to continue on this upward trajectory of prosperity. So these are the types of challenges that we think about at OG pretty much daily. And as we think about them, it becomes more and more clear that biology needs to play a central role in how we deal with these challenges. And more specifically, the study of DNA is vital to approaching these. So DNA, which provides the blueprint for all life on the planet, is an extremely powerful molecule. And we're getting better and better at harnessing that power to tackle the world's great challenges. One of the key contributors to this is an absolute explosion of genomic information now available to us, which is being driven by ever-decreasing costs to sequence a genome. The Human Genome Project, wherein the majority of the human genome was mapped for the first time, took about 13 years and $2.7 billion to complete. In the 20 years since then, novel technologies like next-generation sequencing have allowed us to sequence the entirety of an organism's genome in a matter of hours and for less than $1,000. Concurrently, other technologies are unlocking more than our ability to just read the genetic code, but actually understand its full potential and begin to engineer DNA for our own purposes. One thing that you'll often hear me say is that there aren't many problems that nature hasn't already been forced to solve. So life has endured these past couple billion years due to constant evolution, allowing for increasing levels of complexity driven by semi-random mutations of DNA coupled with the forces of natural selection. So this enormous variety of life that's emerged through these processes now provides us with nearly limitless potential to go in and mine the genomes of organisms to engineer novel systems from collections of disparate genes. As we learn more and more about the complexity of biological systems that occur in nature, we're now gaining the ability to harness that power for our own needs. Now, understanding how kind of the four-letter code of DNA can govern the structure and function of cells, organisms, or even entire ecosystems is one thing, but the ability to accurately and efficiently edit and write that code for a particular output is another challenge entirely. Novel technologies like CRISPR-Cas9-based DNA editing now allow scientists to edit DNA with increasing fidelity. DNA bases can be added, deleted, or mutated with relative ease. CRISPR-based screening approaches are also allowing us to perform millions of loss-of-function experiments in millions of cells at a time, further increasing the complexity of the biology we're able to analyze. Now, we're also gaining new capabilities for synthesizing DNA sequences from scratch. So new synthesis technologies, countless omics-based data sets, machine learning algorithms, engineering principles are now able to converge, allowing us to truly engineer biological organisms. By harnessing all of that complexity, we can guide living organisms to produce essentially anything we need. So this field is known as engineering biology or synthetic biology. A microbe like a bacteria or a yeast or even an algae could be engineered to take in carbon-based inputs like sugars, and through natural biological processes create a cornucopia of outputs. This is already being done in a number of industries. So for example, in health, these technologies are key to producing the spike protein encoding mRNA in our COVID-19 vaccines. Alternative protein companies like Impossible Foods are using engineering biology to produce the iron-binding protein heme, which gives their ground meat alternatives the bloody taste and texture that we've become accustomed to. And clothing companies are skipping the need for silkworms when they produce engineered silk fibers from bacterial chassis for use in clothing. So back to our challenges. So how can reading and writing DNA help us solve these? Well, genomics and engineering biology act as platform technologies, allowing us to use a common set of tools with transformational impact across economic sectors. For example, altering the DNA of microorganisms can make them more efficient at converting waste streams into valuable products, including fuels, foods, textiles, and more, providing us a way to circularize our economy and eliminate waste. Through genomics innovations, Canada is now home to the first dairy cow breeding program that can select for higher feed efficiency and less methane production, making agriculture more sustainable. Cellular agriculture is revolutionizing how we think about sourcing ingredients or even whole animal tissues. And cell and gene therapies are now being approved for use in patients, helping us fight genetic diseases, cancers, and more. So altogether, DNA unlocks the full potential of the bioeconomy. So how do we fit within Canada's bioeconomy strategy? So I want to focus a little bit on two of the four pillars that were brought up in big strategy report. And those are building strong companies and value chains, as well as building strong sustainable ecosystems. So both of these actions are core to what we do at Ontario Genomics and across the genomics enterprise and fit perfectly within our own strategic goals. So to build strong companies, value chains, and ecosystems, you need a number of things, and these were alluded to in the previous two talks as well. And here I'll focus on four of those things. So people, infrastructure, company support, and value chain integration. So at OG, we strive to have all of our programming kind of fit into all of these pieces all at once, creating as much overlap and synergy as possible. But for the purposes of this talk, I've kind of organized them into the categories so it's easy to follow. So first off, people. So for the bioeconomy to thrive, we need big thinkers and exceptional scientists, as well as a strong workforce. University programs in engineering biology and other multidisciplinary fields are slowly but surely growing, but there are still very limited opportunities outside of these institutions to gain skills related to the bioeconomy as we see it. We're tackling that in a number of ways, including sponsoring the development of micro-credential programs with Lambton College and Loyalist College, as well as hands-on bioreactor training with Lambton and the Cultivated Bee. We're going to hear more from Ali from Cultivated Bee in a further panel. Very much looking forward to that. These programs will provide opportunities for reskilling and upskilling for a wide range of learners without the need for deep scientific background. We're also targeting younger students in Ontario who don't necessarily learn about the real-world applications of genomics as part of the standard curriculum. To this end, we've partnered with Agscape to create a set of resources for teachers so they can expose their students to the many ways in which genomics and engineering biology are revolutionizing their food systems. Another large gap in Canada is a lack of infrastructure to support the development and scale-up of bioprocesses. Especially lacking are wet lab space for startup companies and access to bioreactors, especially those larger than the traditional laboratory scale, so over 10 liters or so. To help with this, we've partnered with the Cultivated Bee again, alongside Natural Products Canada, on an innovation hub in Burlington, Ontario. This 25,000 square foot hub includes wet lab space for upstream process development, bioreactors ranging in scale, and with plans to go up to even 25,000 liters, and downstream processing equipment and expert staff to help guide piloting and other activities. This first of its kind space in Canada will help startups and established companies alike in building out their bioprocesses, accelerating their implementation and commercialization. Now, starting a company is a daunting endeavor. Sue just talked a lot about how the MPC kind of supports startup companies, which is fantastic. And but that daunting endeavor is made even more so by a current lack of private investment in hard tech. It's becoming harder and harder to raise capital for companies with revenue horizons exceeding a couple years, and the amount of technology development needed for these companies to succeed are seen as untenable. To help genomics and engineering biology companies get one step closer to investment, we've opened the BioCreate program, which is supported by the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. And through this program, startup companies receive up to $150,000 of non-dilutive funding, access to our network of incubator and accelerator partners, coaching and mentoring on topics such as IP protection and building pitch decks, and a showcase to keen Canadian and international investors, all in the span of an 18-month-long project. We've currently funded 16 companies and plan to fund 16 more over the next 2 years. I think we're going to hear from one of our BioCreate companies, Genesis Bioindustries, in a later panel as well. So looking forward to that, Andrew. Now, ecosystems. So this has been alluded to a number of times, but ecosystem development is very hard. And it's only successful when members of the entire value chain related to these technologies buy in. At OG, we try to be as specific as possible when building ecosystems, focusing on particular technologies, inputs, and outputs. 2 areas where we focused over the past 5 years are bioconversion-based waste upcycling and cellular agriculture. Our 2021 Cellular Agriculture Report highlighted the potential for a $7.5 billion and 86,000 jobs cellular agriculture sector in Canada by 2030, with those numbers continuing to grow into the future. The potential for waste upcycling might be even bigger, with our Waste Can Create Upcycling Consortium looking to showcase and scale up microbial and enzyme-based processes to break down and valorize the immense amount of waste created through our current industrial processes, creating environmentally friendly fuels, textiles, medicines, and more. For example, the world's agri-food sector alone produces over 1 billion tons of carbon-based byproducts. If we can convert these waste streams into valuable platform chemicals, it would revolutionize multiple industries. And that's just one example. Now, to finish off, I just want to say that Canada has what we need in order to capitalize on a bioeconomy strategy, including world-class research, talent, innovative businesses, and abundant natural resources. But there remains a lot of work to be done. In order to be a leader in the world's bioeconomy, we must focus on whole value chain integration, encouraging public and private investments in hard tech and scale-up infrastructure, improving collaboration among sectors, academic faculties, and various levels of government, and we must buy into a common strategy. Now, this will be difficult. Sometimes it's even hard to create alignment within one organization, let alone an entire country, but the future of the planet and our people depend on it. With that, I'll thank you all for your attention. If any of what I talked about today is of interest and you want to hear more, feel free to shoot me an email or find me on LinkedIn. I also want to plug our annual Engineering Biology Conference, Canada Synbio, which will be taking place in Toronto, October 7th to 9th this year. This is the premier engineering biology implementation conference in Canada, and you won't want to miss it. Thank you again to all of the audience and to the organizers, and looking forward to further discussion.
Thanks so much, Michael. I think our first 3 speakers this morning have probably given you a pretty broad outlook in terms of what the bioeconomy represents here in Canada. So I'm going to ask if Shelley and Sandy can turn their cameras back on, and we're going to take a few minutes to do some Q&A. So I've got a number of questions, and I've actually tried to categorize them by speaker. I'll put them out. I'll direct them to somebody specific and then ask others to weigh in if they'd like. And let's see if we can get a few of them done. So the first one is to Sandy. Does the strategy that you were referring to give priority to climate smart biomass as a way to support climate change mitigation?
You know, honestly, I can't remember. Do you remember, Megan? if
It doesn't.
I don't.
But
Yeah,
it does
the
talk about,
terminology. Yeah, the terminology climate smart is relatively new. That was
is.
done in 2018, and I would say that's more something we've been hearing about for the last couple of years. Do you want to add anything there, Megan?
You're right that is a relatively new term, but that being said, if we're talking about sustainability as the, I guess, sort of other term to throw in there, that absolutely comes into play, both within agriculture and forestry, and soon fisheries and aquaculture residues as well. So how about a question for Sue? The ideas for help that you listed, those were all mentioned in the bioeconomy strategy, again, that all three of you had referenced. How do we get government to focus so that we can work on them collectively as a priority across organizations? All three of you mentioned the same thing. So any thoughts?
Well, as I kind of alluded to, I think this kind of thing where multiple organizations who are well respected and doing amazing work in their own rights coming together and talking about these things collaboratively says a lot to people who are trying to make really big decisions and make really think about writing really big checks. So the more that we can be aligned and communicating and collaborating, not just us as organizations, but the jurisdictions, the more that we can be seen to be all agreeing that this big umbrella bioeconomy thing is important, the easier it is for them to be able to say, okay, we've heard you. This is something that's going to make a lot of constituencies happy, and makes it a lot easier for them to make those decisions and focus. So that's really high level, but that's where I think.
Appreciate
Can I
that.
add
Anyone?
something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to add, really well spoken, Sue. The other part of it is, I would say over the last few years, I'm hearing more and more companies, both small and large, commenting on this. So in the past, it was mostly organizations like ours, the not-for-profits, who were really beating the drum on strategy. But increasingly, I'm hearing companies and even some of the larger, for example, forest products companies are saying, hey, we're working internationally. We're hearing about this amazing, forest bioeconomy strategy in Finland that's pulling together partners, leveraging money. Why aren't we there yet with Canada? Because we can see the results it's getting for our competitors. So I think leveraging a lot of those companies to speak up with government, as well as organizations like ours, maybe we need to do a bit more on that side.
Yeah, and I think leverage is the word all the time, right? Government wants to see their dollars leveraged as much as possible. And so, yeah, creating that kind of collective power, I think, is really important, but also just how we speak to government. I think, simplifying our messaging, ensuring that we are all using kind of the same language and we mean the same thing by the same words. That was kind of alluded to in the chat as well. Like, what is the bioeconomy? That might mean different things to different organizations. And when the government hears 4 different ways of thinking about something, they're going to feel like they either have to choose one or ignore all of them, right? So I think, yeah, that kind of collective language and standardization is really important. And speaking to what the government, it's a political thing at the end of the day, right? We need to be harping on jobs for immigrants to Canada, right? Expansion of sectors, expansion of use of our natural resources. And, these are the things that the government wants to tell their constituents. And so we need to give them the tools to do that, I think.
Appreciate all those comments. And you hit on another question, Michael. I'd be interested to hear from the panelists their thoughts on overcoming differences in definitions and scoping of the quote unquote bioeconomy. I've got my own thoughts on that, but why don't you chime in, and then I see Sandy nodding her head as well.
I'm laughing because I think sometimes we get too caught up in these definitions instead of thinking about what's encapsulated in them. So, bioeconomy is a big term. One of the participants asked me about some differences with an ag definition, and to me, they can all be covered under the circular bioeconomy or the bioeconomy writ large. What I do think is super important is we have alignment around the sort of activities around the bioeconomy. To me, that's important. And I was really surprised. We did not, I'm just telling the audience, we did not collude on this presentation or share. And yet 3 very different kinds of organizations came up with many of the similar ways of framing and also talking about some of the challenges. So I think just, some continued and consistent messaging is probably even more important than really needing to fine tune any definitions. And around that, I think it'll come up a bit later and we can get into it. I mean, the issue that's so important in the bioeconomy leverage from natural resources is sustainability. So we'll get into that in a bit more, but that's kind of a really key piece of it that perhaps we haven't done a good enough job on.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's, when we fight about terms, it doesn't go anywhere. But the activities, right, we can talk about, but also like the impact of the goals and the impacts that we're looking to have, right? That's what sells the story. This is really, a lot of this is a kind of a marketing issue, I guess, or a communications
Literacy.
issue. Right. And so as long as, again, we're talking about the kind of thrust towards a similar set of goals, then we can build up what it's going to take to get there. We need to align on all that.
Sue, did you want to weigh in, or?
I think you guys have said it all. I agree with that.
I will say that there's a couple of projects ongoing about trying to align definitions internationally with regards to the bioeconomy and the circular bioeconomy to ensure that there are those definitions across borders. I've got a question specifically for Michael. Do you think there will be an emphasis in Canada within the next 5 to 10 years on synthetic genomics, or will synthetic biology contributions to the bioeconomy be largely microbial genome engineering and metabolomics?
Yeah, interesting. I think, we really like to play in that space of implementation and commercialization, which obviously there's some, microbial manipulation and metabolomics and all these kind of technologies involved in that. And I hope that we've gotten to a point now where we trust the tools that we've built enough that we feel comfortable in the expansion of those in how we're applying it to the economy. And that's really what we're focused on, is taking what we've learned over the past few decades of really kind of in the lab monkeying around with DNA and applying those in ways that are going to be the most impactful possible. And there's dangers of that, especially in communication. The GMO issue is a huge one that we have to think about all the time, public sentiment and things like that. But we do see big strides being taken in the acceptance of these technologies. And so, yeah, I think the focus really will turn to implementation over the next, 5-10 years.
Appreciate that response. This is for all of you. What educational content about the bioeconomy do you think is going to be most important to be communicated? And are there any resources that you have leveraged that we might be able to share? Sandy, why don't you jump in?
Okay, I'll pick up where I made the previous comment. I mean, the area that we face a lot of challenges are around the sustainability of various feedstocks. So there's probably continues to be, and I'm continuously astonished at how much misinformation is out there about how sustainable our feedstocks are, whether they come from ag or from forestry, and also even organic waste in the municipal context. So we need to do a better job. It's a complex area, but we do need to break down those messages. There has been some very good work done by IEA Bioenergy. They have a great website with lots of really good information. Here in Canada on the forestry side, Forest Products Association of Canada has some good material that they have through Forest for the Future, I believe is the name of the initiative. Also FAO, some of these large international organizations. And again, right here at home, Natural Resources Canada and the Canadian Forest Service has some of the leading experts in the world. Many of you know the name of Werner Kurtz. He recently retired, but there's a whole host of folks out at the Pacific Forest Institute and also across Canada that are doing very good work, and you can find their papers and their information. But maybe not enough of it has been distilled for more general audiences. It still tends to be a little bit too complex and academic in my view. I'll turn it over to others to comment.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that that's the first place that you went, because I think I was thinking even higher level than that, like just even what is the bioeconomy? When you walk into a chamber of commerce or a municipal government's office, it really depends on who the person is, how well they're going to understand what the bioeconomy is and what it is in terms of potential. And a lot of them are really very curious about it, but they really don't understand it. So I feel like it's even up a level or two from whether it's sustainable. Just what is it, and what is this thing, and what kinds of companies could be created here, and what kinds of products would they be producing. I feel like we've got a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple plugs. So first of all, I mean, all the organizations being represented on your screen right now, I think, produce reports and have websites with great information. So definitely, use us as a way to figure out your messaging, things like that. And then some specific things for circular bioeconomy. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation is a fantastic resource. For cellular agriculture here in Canada, New Harvest is a great resource, has some great even animations and cartoons and things that are easy to digest. Some reporting out of the Good Food Institute in the US has been great for things like how to utilize commodity crop side streams. They had a recent report on that. So yeah, there's lots of great information out there, but I agree sometimes it's hard to figure out what those are when you're inundated with other information, let's call it.
So I've got one last question, and none of you really touched on this, but I think you kind of all weaved around it a little bit. You all talked about the impending climate issues and how companies in this space are supporting mitigation efforts. But what about the notion that focusing on the bioeconomy or circular economy and all the terminology that we use is about increasing their own productivity and international competitiveness?
Well, you only have to look at what's happening internationally. The US with its Inflation Reduction Act and also the White House mandate that's come down, all of the strategies, the European Union, even in Asia, you're seeing very strong climate mandates. So when you export products, you become part of their ecosystem. So I think, Megan, you were telling me recently about a company who was surprised to find they may be banned from exporting their product because they don't have a sufficient, I can't remember how it was actually described. Maybe you can help me out here.
Yeah, it's related to the carbon border amendments that the EU is now imposing, started imposing with construction materials, but they're moving to the chemical industry. It doesn't matter whether you're biochemical or not. You're essentially getting tariffed when you reach the EU
Yes.
border if you don't have third-party LCAs and full carbon footprint analysis. So,
I mean, this is a direction that's moving. It's a train that isn't going to stop. So,
yeah.
Others may have some views.
Yeah,
I just said the same. Oh, sorry, Michael.
No, go ahead.
Just same thing as I said in my presentation. You know, like where industry is setting these really aggressive targets for themselves, 2030, 2050, to be removing petroleum-based products. You know, whatever they're doing, there's a lot of that coming. So it really does speak to the need for and the demand for these products to take, you know, replace those ones that they're trying to get rid of. So there's a ton of opportunity there commercially.
Yeah, you can't be competitive in an environment that you can't participate in, right? And there's going to have to be some real shifts in how we look at our export economy, and how we extract value from that. And you know, again, yeah, like Sandy and Sue have said, this is happening. We can become an insular little, you know, player on our own, swapping things between provinces, I guess. But you know, if we want to play on that world stage, then we need to actually not even just follow those rules, but be a leader in establishing those rules as well. I think is really important for having our voice on that stage and increasing international cooperation around this. You know, there's, like we said, 60 different strategies. How do we make that one global strategy that could actually function? It's obviously not easy, but it's something that we need to work towards for Canada to remain leaders there.
Appreciate all of the questions from the floor and appreciate all of your time and your willingness to participate. We're going to move on to the next panel, so feel free to sit back and chime in. I'm going to ask Kelly to put up Beth Mason's.
Great. Thanks so much, Megan.
Thanks. Thank you, all three. Great. All right. So we're moving on to panel number 2. And there's lovely Beth. I can see your face. Dr. Beth Mason is the CEO of the Vershuren Center in Nova Scotia. She's been there for the last 6 years. Dr. Mason has a long career in the agri-food industry, from building her own business to large corporations, as well as startups. The Vershuren Center is a scale-up facility for clean tech solutions for today's climate challenges, food security, and green supply chains. The Vershuren Center helps companies advance technology through building shared use pilot facilities and shared lab assets. So again, hitting some of those I guess some of those challenges that we heard the previous speakers talk about. Specifically, they focus on precision fermentation assets, 100 to 10,000 liter capacity with downstream separation, extraction, and drying. So another one of the challenges that we heard about with the first 3 panels. Companies scaling at the center produce bio-based chemicals, dyes, functional ingredients, proteins, flavorings, polymers, and surfactants. The Vershuren Center provides a supportive and collaborative technical platform for scale-ups working with accelerators across North America, venture funds, CRAs, and of course, their partner in Ascend Bio. So Beth, thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to share your screen. And
thank you, Megan.
Awesome, I can hear you.
Good. Let's see. Share. There we go. Let me know that you can see it. Okay.
I can see it. If you might want to put it in presentation mode. There we go. You're getting there.
I got to move you over, I'm afraid. Thanks for the intro. I don't think I need to say anything else now, do I?
There you go.
Yeah, so that's a great intro, and I'm going to dive straight in. It sounds to me like your previous panel spoke a little bit about the sort of higher level educational process we need to go through to get public dollars on board. And what we've done because of the pipeline that we built is not being able to wait for that to happen, and have stacked funded a large capital build. And so I really want to talk about how do we keep that momentum going? Who should be building, and how do we build? Because I think we're past the point of saying that we have, biomanufacturing capacity in Canada. We need to foster it and grow it. So that's kind of where I would like to go. Oh, I don't have functional arrow movement, so we'll go with this. Just a little kind of positioning, and I don't think anybody would, this is new to anybody, but you talk about targets earlier. By 2050, we expect that 60% of our basic materials will be replaced by biologics. And this is a McKinsey Global Institute report. And again, talking about the US, $1 trillion opportunity right now. And, when it comes to health and disease, which is rather critical, certainly in Canada right now, 45% of the disease burden will be addressed with biologics. So it kind of talks a little bit to that piece where I think, federally it's recognized that, there's a pharma aspect, but not all of the therapeutics and all of the other, health and disease mitigation products that come under that banner. So what we did was we have selected basically some of the top companies coming out of accelerators in North America who have their innovation. They've got to TRL4. We're quite specific on our intake metrics, and they're ready to scale. So what you have is a whole ecosystem of innovations through incubator and then accelerator. You narrow that down as companies drop off to the top ones that we hope to then help to scale. And to do that, it's quite clear that any clean tech, whether it's biomanufacturing or other, is capital intensive. And so why would we have everybody raise investment for something that's transitory versus us build that capacity for them and they travel through and deploy into industry to meet those industry goals? And so that's what we did. These are our metrics and the pathway that we expect companies to travel along. Is premised on the fact that there's a sort of cliff edge as IP finally exits universities and it doesn't have very many places to land. We have some good CROs that we partner with who help on that one, and that speaks to how we need to build a collective pipeline. But once they come in, post TRL 4 or 5, the goal is to scale as quickly as possible, and typically those scale milestones match their funding and investment milestones. And so on a pilot, we'll see them go through angel and pre-seed, and after that, they're into Series A and B and supplying clients with product. So what we've noticed as we move clients through scale up is that there's a little bit of a gap, a skills gap in a lot of teams, in that they originate at the bench and have an amazing science team, but they don't necessarily have the translational team to get to scale and the skill sets. And so as we've built our like physical plant capacity, we've started to have to build some training programs to start to infill where those skills are missing. And one would expect that in a cutting edge industry, that necessarily we haven't really trained all pieces of the puzzle to make it work. So we have amazing genetic engineering across the country, but when it comes to deploying it into large scale reactors, we don't seem to have picked up the baton there. So as I said, we built in the middle of COVID, we built our pilot, which was 100 and 1,000 liters, and thought that would be lots, and off they would go and keep on growing. And instead, the next stage of investment is what we call 10x. And if you can't demonstrate at 10x, then you're not getting investment. And so we built 10x. And that's the sort of challenge I think I want to put out there, is that's been a challenging process. And I know Megan's engaged in building plant in the middle of COVID successfully, and can attest to some of those challenges of new builds and new innovation. And so that's what we've done anyways, is in Europe, that would be a 10 cubic meter reactor vessel. And we've got a drop-in space and line for a second one, 15 to 20. And our client pipeline now can continue to grow and move on to their next stage, which would be the last stage, would be CMO, contract manufacturing, before they have built a plant, hopefully here in Canada, and we haven't lost them to other countries that do have this capacity. And that's the risk, so we've grown these clients through their Series A and B, and if we don't have that capacity, then they're going to go to Mexico, or they're going to go to France or Italy or Belgium, and they're lost, and the green supply chain is lost with them. And so that to me is the urgency to build. What we've also embarked on ahead of time, as well as the training, is to digitize as much as we can to also speed up a company's journey to commercialization and reduce the number of runs, which kind of sounds like we do ourselves out of business in a way. But there's such limited capacity, we need them to move faster. And so we've engaged with partners and some of our clients to start to digitize and model their processes so that we can then better understand them for their ultimate engineering design, and also reduce the time to get to scale. And I think, the goal of that is a number of things. Is while we do that, we get all their process knowledge, and then we also have our plant knowledge, which we'll integrate into a complete digital map, which then will give us the true carbon footprint of those clients, and ourselves a path to net zero biomanufacturing, which is going to become more and more critical, as you guys were talking about, in terms of metrics to get export. So what are our needs now and in the future for national-based biomanufacturing? And I think the number one is physical plant. As I've said, we've built some, and across the country need to build much more. I think every city has a shortage of wet lab space and bays, and that's just a space piece. The equipment is the key piece after that, and these are expensive pieces of equipment. So as I said, why have everybody buy them if we could collectively get together and build? I mentioned the missing skills gaps there, and that becomes apparent as teams grow, that your scientists aren't the same people that can industrialize your process. We support our teams with engineers and downstream process expertise, as well as the upstream. And these are the three areas really where we think there's opportunity for us to add training programs so that those people are there to be hired by our clients as they grow. Our first one's the industrial operators, and that program is with collaboration with CCNB in New Brunswick, and they'll do the online and we'll do the hands-on training at the 10X facility. And the goal being, all the people who embark on that program will have a job at the end of it, either with ourselves or our clients. Because we're in a position where there just aren't those skills, and you're competing with each other for the same people. So that's not a scenario we need to be in. So where to from here quickly? I think we've got to get serious about physical plant building and how we support that with a 3P model. I think you've got large corporate partners who need the supply chain materials, and we need to partner those with CMO organizations and with public dollars. So we have a shared asset that we can run the pipeline through. The second is we need to connect the dots. Like, we need to be working together nationally in our biomanufacturing sector, so that we're not all trying to build the same thing. We're building complementary pieces of that pipeline, as I call it. So we get linkages between the facilities, and you pass a client down the pipeline instead of one entity trying to have everything. And at that point, I think we can then start to have a sensible conversation about specialties in specific areas, whether it's gas-based or whether it's cellular, and so on, and decide where do we build the capacity. But I guess my word of warning is it isn't easy to build, so we need to get serious about how we properly finance that. And that speaks to the collective national action that's needed to recognize the urgency of this, because these things take time to build, and they don't happen overnight, and yet we need them right now. And we have an amazing pipeline of innovation coming out of our universities with nowhere to land otherwise. And that's it for me.
Thanks so much, Beth. I've got all kinds of questions that I have kind of written down, and I suspect we'll get a few more coming in. So thanks again. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Rob Nicol. Rob is the manager of Bioindustrial Process Research Centre at Lambton College and the Canadian Bio Clean Tech Applied Research Network. Welcome, Rob. Dr. Nicol holds a PhD in plant science from Western University and spent 9 years as an instructor and researcher in agriculture technologies at the University of Guelph, and has contributed to over 100 applied research projects. His research in sustainable agriculture production in field and controlled environmental settings has been disseminated in conference presentations and published in journals such as Phytochemistry, Acta Horticultura, and Applied Microbiology and Biotechnology. Dr. Nicol is currently the manager of Lambton College's Bioindustrial Process Research Centre, BPRC, and the Canadian Bio Clean Tech Applied Research Network, CBARN, a much easier acronym, which is a network of 6 colleges and universities that collaborate with small and medium-sized bio-based companies to provide access to research and innovation services to support the development of new and optimization of existing biotechnologies that generate advanced commercialization and job growth. Lambton College is the lead institute for the network, and I think it's great that you are following on Beth, given Beth was talking about the pipeline and what needs to happen. So feel free to turn your mic on if it's not already on. Take control of the screen and share your presentation.
I shall. Thanks so much. I need to shorten that profile, I think, a bit, but thanks for the introduction. That's great. Okay, so thanks for the introduction, and thanks so much for having me here today and to give me the opportunity to talk about CBARN. This is an academic network that's been funded by FedDev Southern Ontario. So today, the overview of my talk today, I'll talk a little bit about CBARN, the network history, the objectives, and the members. CBARN stands for the Canadian Bio Clean Tech Applied Research Network. And I'll also talk about some project development and examples and project examples, and also talk to you a bit about the impacts and collaborations of the CBARN network.
Rob, I'm just wondering, yes. You have this on, like, it's showing your next slides in your notes.
Oh.
I think if you go to display settings up at the top, and you click swap presenter view and slide view, there you go.
Great, thanks so much. So it looks good now? Okay, great, thanks so much. So, why a network? Well, I'd like to start off with talking about why the network. It's kind of there's a lot of power and performance opportunities in having a network. Why a network? Well, there's broad areas of support that we can support our companies with. We can serve those companies more comprehensively. So the first point here is it's a bit, our expertise can be broadened by having a network, but it also can be deeper as well. So broad and deep with this network approach. The upshot of these two things is we can enable further company expansion. FedDev has funded this under the Jobs and Growth Fund. So they're very interested in seeing companies grow and hire new people and those sorts of things. Now for the network itself, the academic partners, there's easier collaborations and complementary expertise between members. So we can help each other. We can help each other fill in some spots where maybe there's not the proper capacity at one institution, another institution can pick it up and run with it. So therefore, we kind of boost the network members' capacity overall for research. And a bit of a sneak preview for my last slide. quite an efficient and centralized administration for project and financial management. If you're in this area of work, you might know that it can be a lot of work, attracting funds, applying for funds, then reporting on those funds. So thanks to FedDev, there's one nice bucket of dollars that can allow us to quickly help a lot of companies right off the bat. And then why a network? Well, this last one is the FedDev mandate, but it could be a mandate to fulfill any government or societal need in a better manner. So for FedDev, they were very interested in seeing us leverage the capacity and efficiency to support a green, inclusive, and globally competitive Southern Ontario. And the network approach, there's a picture of us, some Lambton researchers visiting Mohawk last December. It was quite a nice visit and a nice exchange of ideas. So the funding and objectives, I think I mentioned this was supported by FedDev Southern Ontario. It's an initial investment of 2 years, actually just under 2 years, about 20 months or so from beginning to end. And they wanted to see us leverage our expertise to really help advance the bio, clean tech, and natural health products industry. So a little bit of history about CBARN. We were started in July 2022. Was the official kickoff and announcement. We worked for a while and then added our first new member, ICFAR. The first 4 members were Loyalist, Mohawk, Fanshawe, and Lambton. And then we slowly expanded over these 20 months. So that first new member we added was ICFAR at Western. Within the first fiscal year of ending CBARN, we had 26 companies supported, which was no small feat within such a short time. The following September, we added La Cité in Ottawa as another academic member of CBARN. And by November 2023, we had hit our original target of helping 65 companies. Again, just like to highlight, that's a lot of outreach and work in a very short time. And it was actually well ahead of schedule because CBARN ends this March. End of this month, basically, we'll wrap up all the projects and report on our KPIs to FedDev. So here are the academic partners of CBARN as they stand now. As I mentioned, Mohawk, Fanshawe, and Lambton and Loyalist started it off. And then we added La Cité and ICFAR. We have a great wide, as I was mentioning earlier, a broad expertise in biotechnology, sustainable energy, waste valorization. But if you look at all of these colleges in ICFAR and look at their expertise, you'll notice that there is some overlap, but there's quite they're complementary, but it's also an opportunity to broaden out and help all sorts of companies that perhaps one of these institutes couldn't really help on their own. And that gets me to the power of the network. Just again to highlight all of these things that we can do, and some of them are quite, I think, kind of go above and beyond what you might expect an academic institution to be able to help with. So we can, yes, we have a lot of chemistry expertise, and we can grow plants and formulate natural health products. But sometimes, if you see this one point down here, develop technologies to valorize waste as an example, a lot of times a company might come to us just with an idea. Some companies are more mature, but some of them just have an idea and a vision. So for those companies, we can help them build something from scratch, a new process to get them to where they want to go, maybe develop a new product. Again, those are more smaller companies that maybe just have an idea, but we work with a range of companies. Some of them have a very good idea of what they're doing and need a very specific type of help. Do you have an LC, MS, or do you have this type of equipment? So we're really helping a gamut of different companies and different needs with this approach. The CBARN network, again, as a whole, can do all sorts of interesting things. We can work with restricted materials. On the right-hand column here, you'll see we are approved by Health Canada to work with cannabis, psilocybin, and then at the bottom of that right-hand column, you'll see we can work with regulated toxins, microbes, and cells under our containment level 2 labs that are there's 2 in the network. So we can do a lot of things. We can do a lot more as well. So if there's anything of interest today that is piquing your interest, please reach out to me, and happy to answer any questions or put you in contact with the right person at the other CBARN members as well. So the power of networks again. not redundant with the last slide, this slide I'm really trying to emphasize the infrastructure and equipment. And again, this is just a little snapshot. If you want more information about specific equipment, please let me know. And I can put you in touch with other CBARN members as well, or steer you towards our Lambton page of equipment lists and lab walkthroughs. But natural product extraction at Loyalist, they have a very large supercritical CO2 extractor shown here. Agriculture biotech at Fanshawe, they have some seed coating equipment that's used to coat seeds with microbial products or natural products to try and displace those petroleum crop inputs that are conventionally used. Industrial scale conversion at ICFAR, just outside of London. So they're working with gasification, pyrolysis, combustion technologies at a very large scale, something that's more industrially relevant. And it's kind of that idea that I heard earlier about, passing on the baton to other partners in the network. If one of the CBARN members maybe proves something at the benchtop stage, can we scale up and grow and pass it on to ICFAR and then even have it commercialized? Fermentation at Lambton, we have a 32-liter bioreactor here, looking at larger sizes as well. But we also have lots of chemistry equipment and extruders for biomaterials and all sorts of other things. Mohawk can create biofuels. They can actually do emissions testing on biodiesel and other fuels, and a whole sorts of related equipment for them. Plant propagation at La Cité. These are more mature plants shown here, but a lot of cannabis companies are very interested in tissue culture and saving their genetics as little petri dishes of tissue culture of vegetative plant cells, rather than trying to always keep clones going. So there's a lot of great plant propagation and tissue culture work at La Cité. So again, that's not what all of these members do. It's a little snapshot of the different types of equipment and capacity that all of these partners can do. And just like to take this moment also to thank a lot of our funders for funding the equipment. So NSERC and CFI and ORF are really enabling us to help all of these companies. Again, I mentioned earlier, some of the bigger companies are a little more well-established, but equipment and infrastructure is highly important to some of those SMEs that, again, might have an idea or a little bit of momentum, but don't really have, a 500 kilogram reactor to do pyrolysis on biomass, or they don't have a $500,000 worth of LCMS, something like that. So infrastructure is critical in that network and to really help us achieve our goals of helping different companies. So examples of some project and research areas. These are just, again, a little snapshot of broken out across the different members. The FedDev Jobs and Growth Fund wanted to see jobs and economic growth, but also they wanted to see more participation in underrepresented groups. So many of these companies are led by newcomers to Canada or Indigenous groups or women. So we've been very lucky and very thankful to have great partners in all of these different areas. Some of them, again, shown here can be quite small, but some, like Greenfield at the top, are quite large and multinational. So we can really help a gamut of different sizes and needs. Greenfield Global, just as an example as a segue for my next slide. They came to us last fall. They're doing different projects with different institutions, throughout Canada. They had a challenge with trying to hit some milestones on some of their production project goals of creating sustainable aviation fuel. So they came to us, and thanks to this CBARN network and thanks to the funding from FedDev, we were able to quickly engage them and get a project up and going just within a matter of a few weeks of that initial call with Greenfield. So it was quite technically challenging. We were working on optimizing a catalyst for them that they're using to convert waste into sustainable aviation fuel. So they needed to optimize that catalyst, looking at different binders to increase the strength in different shapes. They wanted to optimize it, but they also needed a fairly large amount of it produced to send to another institution out west that has a pilot plant for making sustainable aviation fuel. So they had a real time crunch. And again, just if you're not too familiar how it works in terms of usually writing a grant and having it reviewed, that can take quite a while. Excuse me. So CBARN enabled us to quickly help this company and make them and help their progress with other needs and other projects. And we're really able to hit the ground running with them. And again, it's thanks to this network approach and this cluster funding. So along those lines, generally, this is how we usually develop a project, right? We have to identify a company, then we look at the project and their needs and evaluate them and see how good a fit it is. Then we have to think of which fund to apply to and apply to it. Wait for those reviewers, those funding reviewers to come back and give us a yay or an A, and then get to work. So it can be a bit of a process. So I'm just highlighting the 2 yellow boxes here, project evaluation and financial evaluation. Again, the network approach and those dollars that were already here and approved allows us to quickly help Greenfield, but also help all sorts of companies quickly hit the ground running. The project evaluation and the financial support evaluation might take days instead of conventionally might take months to hear back if you're proposing to do a project once at a time. So project impacts, we've had some hard targets for FedDev and our KPIs, number of new collaborations, number of business supported. Again, in about 20 months, we've hit all of these targets. We're still counting and anticipate all of these targets will be hit in the next few months, but just really trying to show here how many projects we could help, how many different companies, and also the support for those overarching mandates of jobs growth and engaging with underrepresented groups. Maybe that idea here is best exemplified on this slide. So here's the CBARN collaborations over the network. Won't go through all of these, obviously, but just like to thank all of our academic partners, Loyalist, Mohawk, Fanshawe, ICFAR, and La Cité, and also all our great researchers here at Lambton. This is an incredible amount of companies engaged, again, in a relatively short time, in about 20 months. If you see the active projects pie chart over here, you can, and the areas of application, you can see where we're working. So BioCleantech is broadly defined, NHP is a bit broadly defined, but most of our activities usually could be described as biotechnology or agriculture focused, or even food as well. And then that bottom graph shows that geographic region that we're working in. FedDev Southern region is actually defined as Ottawa down, so we're able to work with companies within Southern Ontario, but all the way up to Ottawa as well. So again, thanks so much for our CBARN partners. Thanks to our funders, and thanks maybe most importantly to all those companies that are engaged with us. And it's been a pleasure to work with everyone on CBARN. So thanks very much. And I would like to, I was going to say take questions, but we have a question panel coming up. So I think I'll just leave it there. Thanks, everyone.
Megan, you're just on mute there.
Of course I am. Thanks so much, Rob. I think you and Beth both highlighted the opportunities that colleges represent to support early stage companies and to be that quick turnaround for solutions with regards to technology. So my next speaker is Dr. Ali Nickdell. He's the Director of Innovation at the Cultivated Bee. And we heard the Cultivated Bee mentioned earlier on one of the presentations. So Ali Nickdell, the Director of Innovation. Ali obtained his PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Waterloo, followed by 2 years of postdoctoral experience at the University of Toronto. His primary expertise lies in bioprocess development, synthetic biology, and mathematical modeling for biological systems. Prior to joining the Cultivated Bee, Ali accumulated more than 10 years of professional experience in process development and commercial manufacturing within the biopharma industry with companies such as Sanofi Pasteur and Stem Cell Technologies. So welcome, Ali. Maybe you could just take your mic off and share your screen.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let me share my screen 1 second. Do you see my screen?
I see your screen. You just need to put it in presentation mode. There you go.
Can you see it now in the presentation mode?
No, it looks like you didn't quite click on it.
Oh,
You hovered,
okay.
but there you go.
Okay, thank
We're
you.
good. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about transformative technologies for scalable and sustainable protein production. I'm talking about my company, Cultivated Bee. See how it goes. Okay, so Cultivated Bee is working in the cellular agriculture. So the cellular agriculture field is a very broad field. I mean, you may have heard a lot about the cultivated meat, cultivated food like eggs, or chemicals like solvents that can come from microbes instead of oil and gas, or food additives, and leather. Many applications that I mean that the traditional agriculture can do. We can do it in a much more environmental friendly and more economic way using the cellular agriculture. There are two categories of cellular agriculture products. One is the acellular. So in this category, basically the microorganisms, the microbes or cells, they secrete some type of products like proteins. I mean, you may have seen that vanilla that comes from the fermentation. Or using yeast to produce egg proteins, or it could be cell-based products. So the cell-based product, the cell itself is our own final product. As a famous example is the cultivated meat. So two types of main product you can see in this area. Traditionally, you have seen that, fermentation biotechnology helping the biopharma. I mean, in many years ago, we used to extract insulin from pigs. Now, most of the insulin is produced using the microbes, using the genetic engineering technologies, and then the cells are fermented in a big bioreactors, and then insulin is produced and is extracted. So this is an area that biopharma has been using it for a very long time. Now is the time for less expensive product like foods, commodities, to using this biotechnology approach for producing new products or the existing products in the new way. So bioreactors are one of central elements in this cellular agriculture. I would call it revolution. So bioreactors are the control environment that are typically control temperature, pH, oxygen, carbon dioxide, or many more elements in the fermentation or in the cell culture. So they usually provide a sterile environment, an environment that has agitation, mixing for the nutrient to be mixed properly. The cells can have air and oxygen to breathe. Also, there is monitoring on the process parameters to make sure that they have everything they want just to grow and then produce what we want. So if I go back to the challenges that we have, if we want to implement these approaches, the cellular agriculture approaches for making traditional agri-foods or other kind of products, so there are a few challenges. One is the cost of the raw material. So biopharma, they can afford to buy expensive the growth factors or chemicals or media that can be used, because 1 gram of biopharma products could be, millions of dollars, but 1 gram of or 1 kilogram of meat, how much it costs, even considering the inflation. Also, industry, there is a lack of appropriate bioreactors for this operation, and then the bioreactors, there is issues with the supply chain of them. Also, there is regulatory landscape that has to be addressed for the new products to come to the market. Also, there is a labor shortage. So, I mean, we have expertise in this area, but our expertise are highly trained scientists that usually they go to the biopharma. But if you want to use them for a food industry, which probably I mean the margin is much lower, the talent are expensive, so it may not be feasible from that perspective. The challenges with the bioreactors are that usually now there is a long wait time to get a bioreactor. Sometimes it could take a year or two to get a bioreactor. They are usually very complex to work with. They are not energy efficient. They use lots of energy, especially when it comes to the very large scales. Scale up of animal cells, many of the product is challenging, as Beth mentioned. I mean, we have many companies, they do good in a smaller scale, but when it comes to the scale up, it's a real challenge. And also there is not much of advanced monitoring and control system that can help to do the automation on this process to basically reduce the workforce. At the Cultivated Bee, we have a vision that to go to that direction, to basically be able to scale up this process. Our vision is that instead of having very large bioreactors that they are very challenging from energy, from the operation, we have like a fields of bioreactors at a mid size basically, but be able to control this bioreactor farm with minimal human labor, using that more automation, more advanced control system that can make decision to go in a larger scale and then larger to be profitable. To gain to that area, we need some technologies. We need technologies like automation, like the process analytical technologies, to make sure that we have identified the critical process parameters, quality attributions, and then we can monitor. We have a system, we have a bioreactor with the appropriate sensors and then everything that can basically monitor all these parameters, online, and then make the control, the quality control much easier. So we can build the quality from the beginning to our product. If we are producing cultivated meat, for example, the regulators, they like to see lots of data. They like to make sure that the consumer is safe, everything is safe for consuming. So they like to gain that data to build this quality. So that's an area that we have to work around it. And then that's one of our strategy in our bioreactors. So basically implementing this process, the analytical technology help we have a consistent product. We have, as I mentioned, real-time quality control. We'll be able to optimize our process very fast. We have more traceability if there was an issue with any product. So we have traceability. We can find the root cause. We have much less risk of contamination. as I mentioned, it's much easier to work with the regulatory agencies that they like more data. We have, the ability to do the documentation, reporting, and then making sure that everything is clear. Our product would be like much more scalable. We know when the maintenance is due, so we can plan for that. And then the risks are normally lower, so we have a risk management plan in place. To get to that point, to be able to use to having these technologies, so we need to have sensors. So traditionally, if you want, if you are working in a fermentation facility, as I work in my past life, I mean, if you want to take a sample, normally you have to go, take a sample, send it to a separate lab or area to analyze it. It may take days or weeks to come. So it's challenging, I mean, the scientists, it's difficult for them to make a decision. So you may have lost a batch or two batch of your product, and then it's a big issue in terms of the financial of the scale up. But if you have sensors, at line, inline, or online sensors, so you can basically have this data and then make decisions and then take appropriate action to bring the risk low, or to save the production batch that you are performing. So these are the strategies that we have in cultivated bee. We are working towards developing in-house sensors that our bioreactors they can have extra sensors as opposed to many products in the market. So we can have more control on the systems. We are working with the third-party companies to be able to integrate many of the technologies like Raman technology, which is out there. So we are integrating those technologies in our bioreactor system. And then we are utilizing the data that comes from these platforms to develop mathematical modeling and then the control platforms to make the process very simple. So basically, we are adding this addition to our bioreactor to have a more advanced system, like Tesla, for example. Tesla, they have an autopilot. Basically, we are working towards the next generation of the bioreactors that they have more autonomy. They can make better decision, faster decision without the need of much of human interaction. Intervention, so that helps to bring the cost down and to provide more clarity to the products and to the process. So who we are? We are Cultivated Bee. We are a German-Canadian company. We have our own R&D center in Germany, which is focused on making cell lines more on the R&D and on biology. But in the other side of the pond, in Burlington, this is our building in Burlington. We are focused on the machinery, on the technologies that help the companies with scale up of their processes. We have a huge facility that we have different departments of bioprocess engineering, engineering and manufacturing, quality control. We have our own machinery that we make the bioreactors, most part of it in the Canadian soil, in-house, or even we are using small shops around the area. So it's a network of many collaborators that are working with us, but most are based in Canada. So it's a very the Canadian product basically. As I mentioned, so yeah, we have our manufacturing also. Beside making the bioreactors, manufacturing the bioreactors, so we have a bioengineering hub, which we have, is the picture in my background actually. So we have bench scale labs ready to start the labs in a few weeks. And then we are working on a pilot plan to basically using our own bioreactors to provide capacity for larger scale for bacterial and yeast cells, also for animal cells for the cultivated meat. So we are producing this capacity here in Ontario for the companies, for startups to come and then use our ecosystem. Basically, what we are trying to do is that to bring all these companies under one roof. They come here, they use our space, they use our expertise. So we have a small but mighty bioprocess team that they are ready to mentor, all these companies, helping them with their bioreactor need, with the scale-up challenges, and then hopefully soon we will have our pilot plan, and then once the companies they grow, they de-risk their process, and they were ready to have their own facility. So we have our Canadian-made bioreactors that are very competitive compared to the other products in the market, to help them with making their facility, their equipment. So yeah, our bioreactors are they start at the lab scale. Actually, we had a very important milestone yesterday. We had our 2-liter and 15-liter bioreactor ready. Tomorrow we packed for sending it to Anuga in Germany. So it's the first the bioreactor that is ready to leave the building. So it's been like many months of hard work with many part of the team. So the product is ready, and then it goes for this big event in Germany. And then also we are now working on a larger scale bioreactor for the Lambton College. So we are basically networking with the local industries, colleges, to help them to basically fill the gap in the lab space, in the bioreactor space. So our product also are very modular, competitive in price, and then also we are able to help customize the needs of the university labs, colleges, or companies around. So if they have any constraint with the space, so we are able to work around it and design a specific bioreactor to their needs. If they, there are many different applications. If a company needs some customization in their product, for example, a different impeller for a different need, or anything. So we are local, basically, in Canada. Of course, we are targeting the international market, but this is something that is a value added to our Canadian companies and networks that we are working with them. This is the control vessel of the smaller scale bioreactor. Actually, one advantage that we have across all different volumes, we are using the same control panel. So basically, if someone is working with 1-liter bioreactor, and then they want to shift to the 1,000-liter bioreactor, the scale up is seamless, because we are using the same industrial grade controller system. We are using PLC controller system, which makes it very unique in terms of bioreactor operation. and then it helps to and an ease in scale up of the process. Please, if you are around in Dorrington area, come visit our lab. If you have any question, if you need some expertise in your bioprocess in a scale up, as I mentioned, we have a small but mighty team that they can help you. We like to, help to be part of this ecosystem and then help to build it with our partners. Ontario Genomics, Natural Products Canada, colleges like Lambton College that we have great relationships. So we are trying to utilize whatever, for example, we don't have analytical expertise and an equipment, but we are hoping to, for example, use Lambton College's expertise in this area. So looking forward for more collaboration across the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. We're running a little bit over time, but I'm going to ask Ali to keep his camera on and ask Beth and Rob to turn their cameras on. And I've received a handful of questions, so we're going to do some questions and then we'll take a bit of a lunch break. And make sure that we're all back here for 12:30 Eastern. But I've got a question for each of you, and then I've got a common question. So starting with Beth, you mentioned the risk about not having the capacity here in Canada. Can you talk more about the urgency that you're seeing and what that means?
Yeah, sure. We've seen it firsthand. We get our clients through 10,000 and the next step then is to go to Europe because, we really only have at 10 cubic meters, there's one vessel over in Alberta and ours. And yet, we already have ours booked up before we've commissioned it. So, I think the risk is, as I said, people have to go elsewhere. Ours, for us, our demonstration plant's big, but relative to facilities, say in Italy or in Belgium, that have multiple vessels of multiple large sizes, we're not big. And so, we risk losing them to overseas. I don't want to name clients, but our first 5 Series A have had to look elsewhere.
So we've de-risked all those technologies up to that point and put all the government funds in, as well as our own venture capitals, to watch them leave.
Yeah, and that's the risk. Then, if we want to support manufacturing and greening the supply chain in Canada, then we can't afford to lose the people who are making it.
Right. Rob or Ali, did you want to chime in?
Ali, do you want to go ahead?
You can go first.
Okay, thanks. And Megan, the question was?
The question was around capacity, not having the capacity here in Canada and the urgency associated with helping these companies scale up. What does that mean? We're just losing the companies.
Right. It's definitely a challenge. I think and I saw a question in the chat that might be kind of alluding this to as well about where should we go in terms of biomanufacturing. So I don't want to get into that, but infrastructure is always a challenge. I think I mentioned it in my talk. Small companies definitely need it. Larger companies might need it as well, and always difficult. It's a real barrier. We're working in a high-tech world. A lot of the low-hanging fruit in terms of commercialization and products have been taken. So high-tech world, that's a real barrier for companies if you can't make a product without all of this equipment or a 1,000-liter reactor, right? The capital costs are enormous. So I think more support and more funding for these types of initiatives, for equipment, for expertise, and also focusing and targeting, certain areas is probably the way to go.
Appreciate that. Ali, if you wanted to chime in, if not, that's okay. We can keep moving.
I guess, I mean, what we can offer at the cultivated bee, we can help if there is a, I mean, if we are serious about it, we can help build this infrastructure, this bioreactors, this capacity across the Canada. I mean, we accept the challenge.
I was hoping you'd actually chime in and say we can help build it. We just need the support in order to do that. All right. Next question. Do you think CBARN has expanded the awareness of colleges' capacity for applied research to help companies to commercialize versus what the role that universities typically play?
I think so. CBARN was very data-driven and raising awareness. It's hard to say. We don't have those data points. We count a lot of things, but just with my gut, we do a lot. We're very active, CBARN, the network, very active on LinkedIn and other social media, and we've been really getting that message out. We've been sending to FedDev success stories that they use to promote. So I think the colleges, building the awareness about colleges and different institutions and how we can help in a practical nature has been raised. And universities sometimes are in, different space than ours, maybe a bit basic in discovery. But then I'd point to ICFAR, who's located at a university, but is also very hands-on and very large scale in terms of what a university might do. So I think there's room for all. And I do agree, though, that I think this has really helped, open a lot of people's eyes about what can happen at Canadian academic institutions.
Awesome. Ali, this one I think is directed more towards you. What other analytical measurements are current gaps and challenges to measure in bioreactors, since that seems to be cultivated bees' focus?
So we are working on, different products, even like, for example, glucose, it's not usually integrated, in a bioreactor. So I work in the fermentation facilities, even for measuring glucose. So you had like to basically take a sample and then send it somewhere or do it, later on in the lab. Normally it adds lots of cost because, it's hard to plan everything when there is like a routine in the commercial production. So we are working on other sensors like lactate, the glutamine. So we have other sensors and integrated products that can be added to the bioreactors as needed, or like a CO2 or cell viability. So those are all examples of the sensors or analytical measurements. Yeah.
Thanks. This question is for all of you, but I suspect maybe Rob or Ali will probably chime in. What areas of biomanufacturing do you want to see Canada become leaders in, and how can we get there?
You want to go ahead, maybe, Ellie?
I think we have potential, in going, towards using the bio waste. Canada is strong in agriculture, so all the waste from agriculture could be used as a feedstock for fermentation. That's another area. Also, we have lots of talent. Very good universities. For example, U of T or many universities across the Canada. We can be also a strong workforce, in a biopharma also, because we can support the industry to de-risk the process and then let the companies to grow.
Rob, did you have anything to add?
Yes, I think I would agree with Ali's direction as well. I'll take maybe a broader view, and because I'm thinking of the connections to the funders and different levels of government and what they want to see happen. They want economic growth and exports. So it's nice to think in those terms, you know, can we build a wall around Canada's unique advantage? And it probably is biomass, as Ellie said, agriculture biomass, forest biomass, any type. Can we build a wall around that and really leverage our expertise and grow economically? By building a wall, I mean, you know, make new products, export those, all those good things. I think that's a natural area of our strengths, Canada, resources, biomass, but then adding the value to it, right? Not just harvesting, but adding value, new technology to apply and create new products. I think that's all a great value chain. Some of them fermentation related, some of those conversion technologies are fermentation. So it's all a great fit for the people here. But then I think about, you know, the opposite of that, about not really just economic development, where can we engage with the world? And that might be our molecular biology and all these other related fields, and especially in terms of emerging pathogens with climate change and COVID-19 and other pandemics. So yeah, there's economic growth that we kind of want to keep in Canada, but then can we engage in the world on new vaccines, new medical technology, new, you know, human genome, and harnessing all our, you know, intellectual capital here to really work in another area that we might be collaborating in, maybe is not always necessarily economically driven.
Appreciate that. This question's for all of you, but I'll ask Beth to chime in first because I know she's got some thoughts on this. How much work is there on interprovincial cooperation to help build these plants? Not just the scale-up facilities that you were all talking about, but even heading over to the commercial side.
I think we're seeing more. I mean, we work with Lambton too. We work with Green Centre. We work with, you know, lots of accelerators across the country, but I would say it's not yet orchestrated fully in terms of a national linkage. You know, it's just each one is reaching out to the people in their, you know, closest sphere. We find that on our materials side that there's a big materials cluster around in Ontario, Southern Ontario, Kingston area, and you know, we're part of that one and the biopolymer network. But typically, you know, networks don't tend to become national. I mean, kind of super clusters would be an example. That they're still more regional. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have regional specializations. I think we could, based on the resource inputs, you know, as far as a national strategy goes, tailor it to the specific resources. You know, like maybe if we have, you know, methane in Alberta, they focus on gas transfer type systems. Ontario cellular, you know, various things. We can be 2G type inputs. So there's lots of ways to stratify it, but we still need to be having a connection earlier in the pipeline so that you build that national capacity. I'd say it's still quite regional.
Rob, did you have anything you wanted to chime in on that?
No, I think I was well covered. Thanks.
Yep. Appreciate that. And maybe I'll just ask, do you think a national strategy would help cross those provincial barriers, or at least support the linkages, so that if a company is starting up in Ontario but needs to utilize the scale-up facilities in Nova Scotia and maybe looks at building a commercial plant in southern Quebec, that there's an opportunity to knit that together?
I think so. And Beth was, you know, talking about the regional strengths, and regional strengths are part of a national outlook, and you know, recognize that and connect those dots and all try and grow together.
Awesome. Last question, and then we're going to take a break for lunch. Do you see biomanufacturing infrastructure growing past the pilot scale here in Canada, the way that it has in Europe? Anyone?
I do. A lot of this is driven by the private sector, right? And you know, when we develop projects, we often look at their business plan and plans for the future. And we've seen a lot of encouraging companies that are really going that way. And so I do think it is possible if we get over these hurdles, and you know, that's our goal today, and some of the partners who are all in this room right now are talking about is really helping those companies get to the next level.
Ali, given oh, sorry, go ahead, Beth.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if it's anything to do with us, we will go much bigger. And I'm pretty sure Ali is going to say the same thing.
Yeah, Ali, please chime in.
Yeah, I think, you know, we need, all of us, we need like to be more serious, and then, you know, we need like to help the private sector, because, you know, I mean, this is really capital heavy, you know, I mean, for example, us, you know, we have invested a lot. So if we see, you know, support, you know, I mean, by support, I mean like real support, not, you know, I mean, support in spirit, support in action. Basically, you know, from the government, from decision makers that, you know, help us with funding to de-risk it. I guess, you know, the sky is the limit, you know, we can work together. And I think this is the time, you know, as a country, if we want to be serious, we have to take action, we have to work and you know, together to get to that point.
And then just the action of doing it can be valuable. I was mentioning business plans, and you know, the area we're in, technology and science and research, you know, your business plan might be saying you're going this way, but along the years you may have never made that product A, but with research development collaboration, you're successful by making product B and C or something else. So I think it's a collaborative and iterative process that can definitely bear a lot of fruit.
Appreciate that. And if you haven't figured this out already, the organization committee basically came up with the topics around national bioeconomy strategy, and then building an industrial bioeconomy. If we don't have a larger vision, if we don't have a strategy for this country, it's going to make it much more difficult to build these industrial bioeconomy ventures in Canada. And for the last panel that we're going to be introducing just after our lunch break, so I would implore you all to stick around. It's about pathways to success, and we're going to be talking with a couple of speakers who have been there and done that. So they have been the boots on the ground. They have been the ones that started the companies. They are now the ones that are trying to support and fund these companies moving forward. So they've been through all those hurdles, despite the lack of a strategy and despite our inability, but hopefully better efforts at building an industrial bioeconomy. So thank you so much to the three of you, Ali, Robert, and Beth. And I'm going to turn this back over to Kelly. I think our next break, I've got 12 to 12:30, so we're just a little bit behind, but I think that's okay. So I would ask everyone to, you know, if you want to take your earbuds out, or simply just turn your cameras off and mute yourself, or keep yourself muted. Be back here for 12:30 Eastern time. And then we'll kick it off with Wayne Madiver, who is always a joy to listen to. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in 25 minutes. All good. All right. Welcome back, folks. Thanks, Kelly. Oh, look at that. Look at that pretty face up there.
I'll send you the $50 by wire transfer.
I thought we had decided it was going to be a full Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah, we could do that too.
We'd agreed on a Bitcoin payment. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us again. Now we're heading down. We've got 3 more speakers to go, talking about the pathway to success. And as you can see by Wayne Madiver's title, The Crooked Road to Success, I'm hopeful that you'll hear some great stories about how these individuals have managed to maneuver through the industrial bioeconomy here in Canada, what they've learned, what they can share with you, and where some of the hurdles still remain. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Wayne Madiver, advisor and portfolio manager for Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, so one of my BFFs. Wayne holds a PhD in material science engineering from the University of Toronto since 1985. 1985, Wayne? Maybe I should put that date out there. Wow.
I know. It's a mark of wisdom. Or
Mark of
insanity,
wisdom,
I'm
is
not
that
sure
it?
which.
He's held senior executive management positions with technically based businesses and startups, turnaround or acquisition situations where his skill set as and change management have brought considerable success in the commercialization of new technologies, and I can attest to that. His experience in both private and public companies, both domestic and international, spans a broad variety of industries, including bio and advanced materials, precision manufacturing, recycling, waste to energy, and medical devices. He's currently the advisor and portfolio manager for Bioindustrial Innovation Canada and our Sustainable Chemistry Alliance Fund. He also lectures at McMaster University on leadership for innovation and is a fellow of the Canadian Academy of Engineering and a fellow of the Institute of Mining, Metallurgy, and Materials. Welcome, Wayne. Feel free to take control of the screen and talk about the crooked path.
Thank you. Well, let's pray to the gods of the internet that we're not interrupted here, and hopefully folks can see that in presentation mode.
There you go. You're good.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Probably be talking about this a little bit differently. A little introduction to what we do at BIC for those of you not familiar with us, and then sort of my take on things, but from the investor side. So let's just move on here. So what do we look at? Well, Bioindustrial Innovation Canada looks at commercialization of sustainable chemistry, and that's a pretty broad area. It can be anything from industrial biochemistry to sustainable processes or circular economy. And we have investments in a number of different fields, but obviously, given today's conference, I'm going to focus on those investments we have in the bioeconomy. I mean, we have other ones in battery materials, other advanced materials, water treatment, some testing technologies, things like that. But let's focus on biomaterials and what we do. So we do a number of things. First of all, we provide advisory services, and this could be simply advice, talking to young entrepreneurs, mentoring them. It could be at the university stage. We also provide advisory services to companies that we never invest in. And I want to make that clear that those services are available, and virtually everybody in the organization has a technical background and has operating experience. So we bring that to bear. We have some matching funding for moving companies that are perhaps not investment ready, but moving them to the next stage to remove some barriers to commercialization. We can also help with this program with companies we've already invested in. So key here, of course, is we do investments as a venture capital type model, the area that I'm responsible in. So we provide equity investments to these companies. We tend to lead rounds because we are very early stage. We're sort of post-angel, certainly seed stage. We're happy to share our due diligence findings, and we've done that considerably because, again, we're all very technically well versed. So we tend to do very deep dive on the technical side of due diligence, and we become deeply involved with other companies. Now, this can be at simply an advisory level, but we could be on the board, or we can take an operational level role as well. So doing that, I think as an investor, when I look at the broad spectrum investment in venture capital in Canada, even private equity, but particularly in venture capital, we get much more deeply involved than most organizations do. One of the things we're trying to do is enable lower cost commercialization using idle sites. And this organization started in Sarnia when Dow abandoned its site in Canada, has now become the Blue Water Energy Park. And you can see from the lower photograph, it's basically been broken up into smaller squares. It's pretty vacant. I mean, Dow pulled out their entire polyethylene plant there, their operations back in, I think it was 2008. And they also left their headquarters building, which is now the research center, and where our offices are combined, but it's the Sarnia Lambton Research Center that is co-owned by the county and Western University. So again, idle assets. We have a second one in Sarnia with the former site of Polysar, now called our Lanxio. Again, a portion of that has been decommissioned. So what we're trying to do is encourage companies that need that scale in the bioeconomy to use these idle assets, because in the case, let's take the case of the Blue Water Energy Park. It has a Transalt-owned cogen plant there that generates steam and power. There's water, cooling water, natural gas, all these sort of critical infrastructure services that you need if you're going to build a commercial scale bioeconomy plant. And I want to emphasize that that's one of the challenges is building a plant at a scale that can compete with the petroeconomy. So we focus on all these things, the topics of today's conference that all of you are looking at in terms of biorefineries, to convert biomass to various biochemicals, assisting with marketing of these products if we can, and looking at what are the raw materials? You know, is it crop, livestock, forest residues? Are there biofiber products we can make? Or are there other microbial and algae-derived biomass products that we can assist with? So let me get to the challenges ahead, and I'm going to do this. Well, first of all, my favorite saying when I teach in my master to students that are entrepreneurs is the no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Or as Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a plan until you're punched in the mouth. And it's not a straight road. We all start out thinking it's going to be. We all have the greatest invention since sliced bread, but that's not the case. We've heard some of these stories today. They continue day in, day out. We hear them on the investment side. So I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking about some specific examples of companies we've helped and the challenges that they've had, successes, and in some case failures. So I'm going to take 7 examples of companies that we have in our portfolio that are specifically in the bioeconomy and kind of walk you through each of these. So the first one, Ecosynthetics. They create latex polymers for use in coatings, binders for the pulp and paper industry. They've developed an adhesive to replace formaldehyde-based adhesives in particle board. Think of IKEA furniture, for example. Company went public a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, and raised 100 million. They've had a long path, and they're still not profitable, but they do have significant revenue now. But the R&D costs were significant. If you looked at their annual report year over year, very high R&D costs to try and bring this technology to a commercial level. And the other aspect that I'm going to talk about in a couple of cases here is the time for customer acceptance. You know, it's very easy for us to think, well, this is a bio alternative. It's the same chemistry as the petro product that's being used. However, companies are cautious. Customers are cautious in terms of accepting that product, incorporating it into their production process, into their end product. There's a long series of gestation of even making those contacts, encouraging companies to take the product, to test it, go through their testing cycles. it takes a long time. And that's one of the things that is a common theme in this as a challenge to people in the bioeconomy. But yeah, ecosynthetics, they are public, and they are generating revenue, and they're on the path, but it's a long path. LCY is a really good example, I think, in some ways, a success of what we tried to do with the facility in Sarnia. Previously called BioAmber, they built a massive plant in Sarnia for fermentation products to make biosuccinic acid. However, the path to utilization of that, mainly in the automotive industry, is a bit of a tortuous path. And one of the things about the automotive industry is it's great to sit back and say, boy, if we had five kilograms of this in every car, we'd all be fabulously wealthy. But the automotive system works on a tier system. And you have to convince the tier 3 to use your product. They go through a process, and then the tier 2 has to approve it. Then the tier 1, and then the OEM. And the OEMs are very, very slow to adopt new products. And if it's a radical new product, you need to keep in mind that the design phase for an automobile is between 5 and 8 years. So if you're going to try and change something significantly, you've got a long period. So this was a significant bump in the road. The key lender called the loan, and the company went into bankruptcy. Fortunately, they were purchased by a Korean company, LCY, and the company is back up and running again. On one side, a very sad story in terms of the bankruptcy, and even the lender that called the loan got very, very little out of their loan. And I'm going to suggest that's a bit, one of the challenges we have is the short-sightedness of some of the key lenders in our economy here in Canada. But it's back now and producing. So a bit of a swing and a miss, but not quite a home run yet, but they're getting on base. Ardra is one of the companies that we're deeply involved in. I'm on the board of that. Early stage companies using SynBio to create flavors and fragrances. Very early stage, significant interest from industry, and this is one of the reasons we invested, that some major players in the fragrance industry have said, well, this product looks really good. This is a very small sample stage. So raising seed stage capital has been difficult for the company, and one of the major challenges, both on the flavors and fragrances and also on the heme side, heme being a product that can bring flavor and mouthfeel to plant-based meats, is the lack of scale-up facilities in Canada. And I know I've heard that earlier today from several people, and I'm not going to dwell on that a lot, but it is one of the challenges. I can tell you that there's another company, I haven't named here because we're just putting it through our investment committees and taking it to our board. They're in the SynBio space. They are now at the commercial demonstration scale, something that all investors like to see, and they're having to go to France to do that trial because there's simply not the capacity for fermentation and processing here in Canada. Origin Materials. I hear, again, another, I think, success story, bit of a tortuous path. Origin Materials is out of Sacramento, California, and because of the let's call it the ecosystem here in Canada between SHRED and folks like ourselves and the Sarnia Economic Development Agency, they attracted Origin to build their first commercial plant to use biomaterials to create chemical intermediates. First commercial plant in Sarnia. Now they are making a chemical that goes down the path to PET. So major investors they have in the company are Pepsi, Danone, and Nestle Waters. Obviously the challenge to make a bio PET container. They struggled to raise funding and went public a couple of years ago, raised sufficient capital to complete the plant, and it's had some challenges. And the public markets right now are merciless. We see this with this company when they announced that they were a bit behind schedule on their plan to open the plant. The public markets penalized them harshly. We have another company called Life Cycle, a lithium-ion battery recycler. We were the first investors in that company, went public, and now being penalized for being late in getting to the market. That's the nature of the beast in the public right now. It's unrelenting and it's unforgiving. However, the plant in Sarnia is on the startup process, and they've made some major changes. They're moving forward. So again, just an illustration, it's not a straight line to success. Woodland biofuels, cellulosic ethanol, and this was again, they've been around for at least 10 years. Have a pilot plant in Sarnia, very high capital, a lot of challenges to making the technology work. And there's been a bit of a market shift. I noted Benefuel, which is another company we invested in, that was going to take the corn oil from Suncor's corn ethanol plant in Sarnia and convert it to a carbon negative fuel. They had partially demonstrated their technology, and Benefuel could not even raise the funds to do an FEL3 engineering study, that is to get it to a final cost estimate. They were looking for $5 million. Woodland biofuels, the same thing. Broadly, this is a broad statement as someone who watches the investment field. The market for large capital investors are saying, why would we invest in a fuel when we're all going to be driving electric cars? I think that's a very short-sighted view, because this change is not going to happen overnight. Nevertheless, it's the kind of discussion we hear at the broad base. Comet Bio takes biomass and creates C5 sugars from it. Very interesting technology. We help them by even establishing the supply chain through a farmers co-op in Sarnia. And the whole idea was Comet was going to build a plant in Sarnia, take corn stover, and convert it to C5 sugars. They simply could not get the financial support they needed. They moved to Europe. They've had a difficult path in Europe, but they have built a plant in partnership with a Danish company. Unfortunately, they've run out of cash now, and the Danish partner is going to acquire the company. So it will continue, but the alternative was insolvency. The good news is they will continue, get the plant started again. Fire Rain, the company out of Napanee, Ontario, makes a bio-based firefighting gel. A real lack of funding to scale their business once they got some approvals by UL that this was actually certified for its efficacy in firefighting. And there really has not been any government action on PFAS, on these forever chemicals, the fluorinated compounds that are used in foams. Now, we hear a lot about them now. But Fire Rain has been around for about 10 years, but finally got approvals in 2022 for their products, so they could really attack the market. We're deeply involved in the company at the management level, as well as with engineering and some administration level to help them out. Now they are starting to gain traction. We've acquired some significant municipalities, one in the US, Aurora in Illinois, Markham, Ontario, have adopted the product. And critically, the industrial market, Agnico Eagle Mines and Rio Tinto, iron ore company of Canada, picked up the product. But that's been a long haul for that company to get to the point where we're now starting to get traction. We now have revenue. So what's missing? To try and summarize. Well, one of the challenges, we've heard about the facilities. I've identified one in particular, so I won't dwell a lot of time on facilities, but I will talk a little bit more about capital. One of the challenges has been there's so many of the VC funds and public money is focused on scaling investments. I mean, at this stage, the technology is largely de-risked. I hate to say it, it's a much easier investment play when the company is already moving down that path. The problem is we're lacking seed capital. We're one of the few seed capital investors that are around. Natural Products Canada is another. Chrysalix out west is seed stage. And let's face it, using an agricultural metaphor, if you don't plant the seeds, you don't get the crop. You don't get to put the fertilizer on. If scaling funding is the fertilizer. And I think that's a real challenge right now in Canada. There's just a complete lack of seed funding of enough magnitude to really get these companies going. And we're not talking, we have limitations on how much we can put in. Based on we're supported by FedDev, and we have some criteria there, but there are not enough seed stage companies. And if we talk about the U.S. market, seed is a much bigger number than it is here. The other challenge, of course, is large capital. The fact is the petroeconomy industry's had 100 years to learn how to scale things and bring costs down to the absolute minimum. For the bioeconomy to succeed, it has to be able to do that. And it has to attract that large capital, that 100 million, 200 million to build those plants. So Government, work in government, hell, well, I think we're falling behind in terms of policy and regulatory. We keep hearing in the news we're way behind in respect to the other countries that are trying to reach targets. I'd say there's a lack of technical awareness in government in terms of what does it really take in terms of time and capitalization to get companies to this location. We need more enabling energies, agencies at the right stage. You know, there used to be 6 accelerators in Ontario until the Conservatives took power. Now there's 3 left: ourselves, Green Centre Canada, and CRIDE, all of whom provide different but very vital benefits to those early stage companies. Well, what's a wish list? Well, incentives for investors in the bioeconomy. I mean, mining used to have this. You know, we used to think that we were hewers of wood and you know, diggers of rock here in Canada with the mining industry. And you know, the venture exchange in Toronto was largely mining stocks. I just came back from a massive conference this week called PDAC. It's all mining. It's all developing a new properties. And mining used to have some significant benefits to investors that invested in public companies in mining stocks. No reason why the regulators in the public markets through the government could not provide that kind of benefit as well if we really want to develop the bioeconomy. And secondly, what are the alternatives provided by the government or by regulatory officials in terms of credits? You know, we don't really have a carbon credit program yet. Maybe that's part of it, but what other incentives are there for companies to use a bio alternative in their production process and as part of the chain to get these things to market? So that's a very broad view, but hopefully a little bit of a introspection on specific companies that we've dealt with. Thank you very much for your time, especially right after lunch.
Thanks so much, Wayne. Very much appreciated. I'm hoping we'll get some good questions in. I took a few of them down because I've always got questions to ask you on this crooked road. All right, our next presenter is Kelsey Sukday, professional engineer from DMT Bioproducts. Kelsey has been the project manager at DMT Bioproducts since 2017. He's a professional mechanical engineer with over 20 years of experience in research and development, technology scale-up, and business development. DMT Bioproducts is working on the development of sustainable biorefining technologies to produce platform chemicals and co-products from renewable materials like agricultural biomass, specifically miscanthus and switchgrass. Currently, DMT has a functioning biorefining pilot plant with capability to perform biomass preparations, hydrolysis, and distillation to produce platform chemicals. So welcome so much, Kelsey. Thanks for sharing your screen. Take it away.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, audience, for taking time to join this event. My name is Kelsey Sukdev, and I'm a project manager at DMT Bioproducts. It's an early stage biorefining company based out of Elmore, Ontario. So brief history of DMT Bioproducts. The company started in 2014 by 2 individuals. One is a farmer and another one is a chemist. The vision was to develop sustainable biorefining technology to produce biochemicals from agricultural biomass produced in Ontario. And since one of the owner is a farmer, so he decided to grow miscanthus and switchgrass in about 60 acres of land as a test farming in 2015. So initially, we did our bench scale testing of our technology at the BPRC Center at Lambton College from 2014 to 2017. And based on some of the success at the bench scale, that we proved that we can produce furfural from miscanthus biomass. And then thanks to the AFC and the BIC support, we were able to scale up our technology from bench scale to the pilot scale. So currently we have a 2,000-liter low-pressure reactor, which can handle up to 100 kg of biomass per batch. And also we were able to set up a class 1 div2 distillation system, which can do both atmospheric and vacuum distillation. And this pilot plant is functioning now, and we are able to produce furfural from the pilot facility. And we got great interest for our products. We started working with one of the largest furfural consumer in the world, Transfuren Corporation out of Belgium. And they were interested in our product right from the get-go. So they tested our product both from bench scale and the pilot scale, and the product has been approved. But we need more work in this pilot plant, and I'll discuss more on that in the future slides. And besides this pilot facility, we also have a state-of-the-art analytical capability in-house, so HPLC and spectrophotometer. So we can do all the product analysis and the feedstock analysis in-house. Before, we were working very closely with the BPLC Center to do our day-to-day analysis, but we brought that capability in-house now. Also, we have 2 full-time resource scientists on staff, and we work with a number of external expertise in this space as well, because we are dealing with the technologies like hydrolysis, distillation, solvent extraction. So we don't have all the capability in-house. So that's, we work with a number of industry specialists in petrochemical industry who we are trying to bring those expertise together to the biorefining and technology. In terms of overall goal, we are planning to develop a 1,200 metric ton capacity commercial demonstration plant in Port Belvoir, Ontario. But in order to get to this stage, we have still a number of hurdles that we have to overcome. So this slide talks about what our target products are from the plant miscanthus. So miscanthus has 3 main molecules: the hemicellulose, the cellulose, and the lignin. So our current technology that we scaled up from bench scale to the pilot scale was focused on the hemicellulose, and we were able to produce furfural and acetic acid from the hemicellulose molecule. But we are only valorizing 21% of the biomass right now. So this technology is not sustainable, it's not economically feasible unless we valorize all 3 molecules of the plant. So our next phase of R&D is currently focused on valorizing cellulose and the lignin molecules. For cellulose, we already have done bench scale testing to produce levulinic acid and the formic acid from the cellulose stream of the biomass, and those samples also has been tested by a customer who is interested to buying the levulinic acid. But again, it requires additional R&D investment and R&D infrastructure development to scale up the technology from the bench scale to the pilot scale. For lignin, it's becoming very interesting day by day. When we started this project in 2018, we didn't have any customer who was looking for lignin, but right now we are working for 4 different customers who are interested in testing our lignin, and this market is growing very rapidly. So one of the main customer that we're working with is for the wax emulsion application, because lignin is a hydrophobic in properties. So the wax emulsion produced by our customers, they are currently using craft lignin, but they can't get enough supplies of this craft lignin, and that's the reason they came to us and say, we would like to test your lignin for our application. So it's an early stage of development. We already provided some samples to them, but we still need to do more work to meet the specification they need for their product. The second application of lignin that we are working with is with the University of Laval. So we are doing a joint project with Airbus France, and they wanted to develop manufacture carbon fiber from lignin. This is again an early stage R&D project, but Airbus has heavily invested into this R&D project, and they are working very closely with us and the University of Laval to do the feasibility study of producing carbon fiber from agriculture-based lignin. And the third application that we currently are working on is, again, a concrete admixer. Lignin, again, it has a good sealing and binding properties. So we are trying to see how we can valorize lignin as a binding and sealing agent. So we are working with a company based in Quebec to test our lignin for concrete admixing application. And the fourth application of lignin that we already are testing with a local mushroom grower, because the peat moss they are using for mushroom growing right now is in short of supply, and lignin is a possible alternate to the peat moss. So as you can see, there's a lot of potential for this biomass to valorize into either biochemicals or some of the alternates to other petroleum-based products that are currently being used in the industry. In terms of opportunity for the biochemicals, that especially the chemicals that we are working with, is about a $3 billion market, and it's growing at about 5% right now. Out of the $3 billion market, formic acid itself is half of that, $1.6 billion market. And furfural is about $500,000, and linoleic acid is about $23 million market. And lignin, as I mentioned, is growing rapidly. It's about $900 million market right now, but it's supposed to grow to about 1.2 to 1.3 million in the next 2 to 3 years. So as you can see that this, although we talked about a $1 trillion market for bioeconomy, but we are focused on these only 4 products, and that itself is a big opportunity for Canadian companies to tap into it. Besides global market, Canada itself right now is importing all of these chemicals. And as per the last data, we have imported about $16 million worth of these chemicals. So we have a potential to manufacture these chemicals in-house and also support the Canadian manufacturing growth through that and reducing some of the imports. Our pilot plan that we are planning to build, the commercial plan that we are planning to build, 1,200 metric ton plant will create about 12 new jobs, and will keep 3 scientists in the plant as well. So this is a very good story for Canadian manufacturing, because we need this kind of investment. We need this kind of innovation in the country to grow the manufacturing jobs. And the biochemical plant could be a good way to do it. Besides economic growth, we believe that the biochemical or the biorefinery can also help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So based on the study that we have done so far, the feedstock, cichgrass and miscanthus, can sequester about up to 12 million, can sequester up to 14 million tons of CO2, depending upon the soil type, depending upon the root, but it has a high potential to sequester large amount of carbon. And we did a comparison versus the corn stover. The corn stover is typically right now is used as a feedstock to produce furfural, and the CO2 sequestration of the corn stover is about 2.5 ton. And the switchgrass and miscanthus can go up to 14 ton. So there's a large potential to achieve the GHG reduction through growing these biomasses in Canada. Besides that, as mentioned, Canada is importing about $16 million worth of chemicals from overseas, and these chemicals mostly are coming from Asia. So there's a large GHG emission involved with the transportation of the chemicals. So we can also help reduce those GHG emissions by doing the domestic production of these chemicals. And also the carbon intensity of the electricity, all the resources that's required to produce chemical in Canada is a lot lesser as compared to Asian countries. So for example, the CO2 emission from Canadian electricity generators is about 126 gram equivalent CO2 versus 534 gram for an Chinese or an Asian electricity generator. So there's a huge potential to reduce the greenhouse gases if we can scale up this technology in Canada. Apologize, looks like something happened to my screen.
Are you frozen?
Yeah, it's frozen.
I can share it on here if you'd like.
Sure.
Just 1 second. Okay. So let's go. Is that the one you want?
Next one. Sorry, my computer is frozen as well. I can't even.
Okay, so I think you ended, Kelsey, on the one that was climate change, biorefining technology can contribute to greenhouse gas reduction. And then the next slide, if you can look at it on your end or remember, is barriers to biorefining technology advances.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't see my screen right now, but I can still talk through it. So as I mentioned, we are still in the R&D phase of this project. So we are able to scale up the furfural production, but we still need to scale up levulinic acid and the lignin production from biomass. And the main barrier right now is the lack of infrastructure required to valorize or scale up those technologies. What exactly do we need for that is a class 1 div 2 solvent extraction facility, and also a reactor that can handle corrosive products. So we do need initial investment, and we estimated it's about $1.5 million over the next 2 years to scale up the technologies for the lignin and the levulinic acid production. On top of that, also what we found in terms of barrier is the lack of research scientist availability in Canada who has expertise in this space. So we have gone through about 5 or 6 scientists in the last 5 years, and it's very hard to find a scientist who has a relevant experience in this space, especially the biomass processing using hydrolysis and the solvent extraction and the distillation technologies. So it will be nice if the Canadian universities can look into some of the programs where the students can learn about the bioprocessing using these technologies. And lastly, from the scale-up perspective or the technology advancement perspective, we need a much more collaborative approach between academia and the industry to work on the applied research. So for example, the Walker emulsion, they are looking for a lignin for their application. And right now we need to invest a lot of dollar into developing that infrastructure to do that operation in-house. So it will be nice if the Canadian universities and colleges can collaborate on the application development of biorefining technologies, so that the industry itself or the company, early startup companies like DMT, doesn't have to invest on their own dollar or has to raise a large enough dollar to valorize those products. So next slide, please. Sorry, I can't even see the screen, so.
You're good. You're on commercialization challenges, Kelsey.
Okay. So the commercialization challenges, as you know, is very common theme, and is this technology requires a very high capital investment as compared to like an IT sector, and that's a real challenge. We are looking at about $10 million investment just in capital for a 3 million revenue biorefining plant, and which is a highly capital intensive operation. So of course, a lot of investors, they don't get excited when they see a high capital investment and the long return on investments. And the second, we are competing with very mature technologies, which are petroleum-based product technologies, and we are competing against the countries who has a low labor cost and low regulatory compliance cost. So it takes us a longer for us to figure out the most efficient way of producing these products in Canada. And so there will be a longer period of a scale up will be required to go from the pilot scale to the commercial scale. And that's where companies like DMT require much more assistance from the government while we go through that scale up period, which can take up to 5 years to get to the efficiency we need in our plant to compete with those mature technologies. I can't see
Kelly,
the
is there
screen.
one more slide?
Yeah, I think
Right.
there's one.
So just the project partners, and then I think that's wrapping up.
Yep.
Right.
And the last one, I'd like to thank our project partners, especially BIC. They have been very helpful from 2018 till 2023 to scale up our technologies. AFC, again, for their financial support for the pilot plant setup. And some of the other organizations as well, the Bioenterprise, the BioTalent, they were able to fund some of our students that we hired through the pilot scale-up process. And FedDev Ontario has also provided us support through the ComSci program to overcome some of the barriers that we are encountering right now in the scale-up of the technology. So I'll take this opportunity to thank all of these, and hope we can continue to work with these organizations to take this technology to the next level.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. I appreciate your insight, especially with regards to scaling up these kinds of technologies. So we've got our very last speaker for the afternoon, and it's Andrew Chiappetta, Director of Fermentation for Genesis Bioindustries. Andrew's a chemical engineer with over 10 years of experience in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries. During his time at Sanofi, Andrew's held various positions related to the development, scale-up, commercial development, and validation of vaccine manufacturing processes. Andrew is currently the Director of Fermentation at Genesis Bioindustries, bringing sustainable and compostable PHA biopolymers to the market through novel production mechanisms. Andrew holds a BSc in Biochemical Engineering from Queen's and a Master's in Biotechnology from U of T, and is a licensed professional engineer. So welcome, Andrew. Thank you so much for bringing up the tail end of our event today. Feel free to take yourself off mute and share your screen.
Okay, thanks for having me, Megan. So let me just get set up here. All right, I expect you can see my screen now?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Great. So thank you everyone for having me. My name is Andrew. I'm the Director of Fermentation at Genesis Bioindustries. And essentially today I'm going to be talking about two main things. First is going to be the type of work we do at Genesis, so the products that we manufacture and the method that we actually take to scale up our production processes and develop these processes. And then I'll talk a little bit about, in general, how different biotech companies are developing their processes and getting through the process of scale up and some of the challenges, especially in the Canadian bioeconomy. So at Genesis, we are a Toronto-based biotech company, and we're focusing on two main things. The first is scaling waste to PHA production. And I'll go over what PHA is in a few slides. And the second is really offering market-ready PHA-based products, as it is quite a challenging material to work with. So we're focusing on not only producing the material, but helping customers get the material into their final end products and how to actually work with it in manufacturing environments. So PHA is a great solution for a lot of the plastic problems of our world. PHA stands for polyhydroxyalkanoate. So essentially, it's a naturally occurring polymer that's made by bacteria. It's not made by fossil fuels. And what you can see over here on the right-hand side is a cell that has PHA inside of it. And PHA essentially is an energy storage mechanism for microorganisms. So in the same way that mammals use fat to store energy, many microorganisms can generate PHA to store energy within their cells. So we essentially harness this power and really supercharge it to get as much PHA possible per cell. And the great thing about PHA, it is completely biodegradable in marine and in soil environments and can be compostable in your backyard. It can replace polypropylene, polyethylene, and polystyrene in many different applications and is quite a versatile material. When we look at the sustainability and the compostability of this product, essentially PHAs are both marine and soil biodegradable. And depending on the thickness and the formulation of the material, it can be biodegradable anywhere between 6 and 12 months or longer if it's a very large piece of plastic. On the left-hand side, we have a study that Genesis did where we took a PHA film and we buried it in a compost pile, and we could see that after 5 weeks, the film is completely degraded. And on the right-hand side, it's a study done by an external organization where they took a full PHA straw and put it inside a marine environment. And you can see that within 12 weeks, the straw is completely degraded without any microplastics remaining. And I think this is really important to highlight because with some other sustainable plastic solutions, microplastics are still an issue. When we look at PHA, this is not necessarily the case because microorganisms are actually breaking down the monomers of this material and using it as an energy source. So there's really nothing remaining after the PHA is degraded. And right now, PHAs have been on the market for quite some time, or at least in, a lot of research has been performed on them. But up until now, it has not been a successful material in terms of end applications. So why is that? Really, well, initially the PHAs that were most prevalent were called polyhydroxybutyrate, PHB, and it was quite brittle. You can see on the left-hand side, we have a test where we essentially stretched the PHA. We made a dog bone of PHA and we stretched it, and you can see that it breaks quite easily. It's very rigid, very brittle. It's very challenging to process, and there's limited applications with this high-cost material. Now, Genesis manufactures the type of PHA called PHBB, and essentially this is a tunable material where we can adjust the flexibility or the rigidity of the material based on a few different things, our microorganisms and our fermentation process. And that allows us to have tunable properties and also drop-in processability into many applications, utilizing the existing processing lines and not necessarily having to have a full new processing line or manufacturing facility for this material. In addition, because we're using waste substrates like food waste, waste glycerol from biodiesel production processes, and yeast waste, we're able to generate a significantly lower cost PHA by having a lower media cost input into our process. So what exactly makes Genesis PHAs different, and why are they tunable and why are they flexible? Well, essentially, as I mentioned, we make a PHA called PHBB, which is a isodimorphic polymer made of two different monomers. It's hydroxybutyrate and hydroxyvalerate. And essentially, the different composition of this polymer will change its properties. If we want to have a more crystalline or more rigid polymer used for hard applications, then we want to have a higher hydroxybutyrate content and a very low hydroxyvalerate content. Whereas if we want a more amorphous or flexible application, for example, you can think of like a water bottle would be a great example where you need it to be flexible. We can increase the hydroxyvalerate ratio through genetic engineering, through fermentation conditions, and that allows us to achieve a polymer that is more flexible. And then in addition, we blend this polymer with other materials, either organic materials or inorganic materials, to achieve the desired properties that we're looking for. So that is one of our major value offerings, is the development and compounding of different formulations of PHA. So like I mentioned before, PHA, it's quite complex to work with. It has a more narrow thermal window than a lot of other plastics on the market. So it really requires some special expertise in order to implement it in a manufacturing sector, or actually to use it for end products. So what we do is not only do we make PHAs, but we work with customers to compound them using different fillers and additives, and actually assist the customer in the injection molding or the extrusion blow molding applications to ensure that they're getting the product that they want with the material properties that they want once they're through their entire evaluation process. And these are some of the products that we've made to date. Mostly we focus on injection molding and extrusion blow molding applications. When we look at injection molding, we've been successful in making several different applications. The first is a supporting ring. So it's this black ring that you see here for compostable coffee pods. So in the past, if we think about K-cup pods, things like that, of course, a lot of plastic in there, and a lot of it is, it's going to go straight into recycling or landfills. What we've done is we've worked with a company called Club Coffee, where we're making a PHA supporting ring so that the entire coffee pod is completely compostable, home compostable, actually. We've also had some success making other types of products, so some proof of concept products like sunglasses, really just for fun to show the capabilities and the flexibility of this material. And we've recently perfected some other products like these jars over here that can be used for different types of cosmetic applications or different types of packaging applications. In addition, we've been working on extrusion blow molding applications. So this is for different types of customers that are looking for more bottle type applications. For example, we're working with a pharmaceutical company to take in their yeast waste and convert it to PHA through our upcycling process, and then assist them in making pill bottles that they can then package their own product in it. So it's a really great circular story. And here we have just some iterations that we've gone through. We have some larger extrusion molded bottles, some smaller extrusion molded bottles, and then kind of the earlier iterations of water bottles, just to demonstrate or to really understand and to learn how to work with this material and what formulations will work in these different types of applications. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is really how do we go about commercializing these novel biotech solutions? It's not a straightforward avenue. There's a lot of things to consider. I thought I would highlight 4 areas that I think we've been not only successful at Genesis, but that we've learned a lot about, and I think are important areas to highlight when talking about new biotech companies and how we actually bring these through from an early idea to actually a product on the market and a commercial application. So the first is core technology development. Now, core technology development, essentially, this is the foundation. This is the fundamental value proposition that a company will bring. So a lot of times, this is what kind of supports the starting of a new company, and it's usually the innovative technology that the founders of the company will bring when they're trying to start a new company or commercialize something. So often companies will have this available. It may be proprietary organisms, it may be strains, molecules, materials, or even production processes for valorizing waste, for example, like we've seen a lot of today. And typically this has been developed either through years of laboratory work, research, technical breakthroughs, or maybe just some really good luck. So Genesis has had this kind of technology when we started out, or we were developing this technology. And on the bottom right, you can see an image of some of our proprietary E. coli cells, where the white spheres within the cells are actually PHA. So you can see that these are cells that would not normally produce PHA, but they've been highly engineered to produce high levels of PHA within the cells. So this is something that most startup companies are familiar with. This is the comfortable area where they know they can work on their technology, they understand their technology well. But really, what do you do with this? What comes next? So the next thing in terms of a lot of the molecules that we're talking about is bioprocess development. So typically bioprocess development is done at the small scale, either 1 liter reactors all the way up to potentially 20 liter scale. And you can see on the bottom right here some images of our our small scale 6-liter reactors that are kind of our workhorses in the lab. And this is really important because the small scale is really the only opportunity to develop the process, scale up the process, or fine tune the process, improve yields. And it's really important to develop the initial production and purification methods at this scale, as it's significantly cheaper, much more flexible, and you can test a high number of iterations. This also, especially in the case of Genesis, this allows us to do prototyping and product testing. So we're able to generate smaller quantities of material from these small scale bioreactors and generate prototype material that we can then send off to customers, or we can test customer waste streams with our small scale fermentation processes. But what are we really focusing on when we run these small scale process optimizations? Really, it's process understanding, I would say, first and foremost. It's very important to understand things like critical and key process parameters and critical quality attributes of your product to ensure that you are making the right product with the right consistency. In addition, product yield is huge. And this has been touched on a lot today. How can you ensure that you have a commercially viable process? Well, you need to have a high enough yield that actually makes it worth it to run your process. And in addition, you need to ensure that you can achieve these quality targets consistently. So it's really important to have a high number of iterations at this small scale to demonstrate the variability of your process, to understand the variability of your process, and also how to understand how to control it. Inevitably, there will be things that go wrong, or surprises within your small scale process development, and documenting all of these maybe adverse conditions or failures during your process is very important to form that basis of process understanding. And the more time that's spent in process understanding at this scale will pay off as you scale up, because you will be able to more efficiently learn and implement those process understandings during the scale up process. So next, I'd like to talk about techno-economic assessment. Now, this is an area I think is very important, especially for startup companies and small companies. And it's an area that is very challenging, especially from the perspective of Genesis. This is an area that we spent a lot of time on, and it's really important, especially when talking to people like investors or potential stakeholders. So what is a techno-economic assessment? Well, essentially, it's modeling the commercial process. It may not be modeling the process as is today, but modeling where the process either needs to go or what it would look like if we scaled it up given our current process understanding, yields, etc. And what do we want to get out of this techno-economic assessment? Well, I think one or two important things are really the facility capital costs required to build this facility. So understanding what size reactors you need, what size purification process you need, how to efficiently structure your process to maybe get the most out of your resources. An example would be staggering your reactor harvests to have maybe 2 fermentation lines with 1 purification line. And also the operating expenses required for facility, because once you get this facility built, you need to run it and you need to have capital to run this facility. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. In addition, I would say one of the most important things that we get asked all the time is, what is your cost of production? And generating a techno-economic model such as this is really one of the most important ways, and I would say one of the most accurate ways of understanding what the cost of production of your product will be, so that you can understand what you will sell this product for. And that's really important to develop the business case. And this has been an essential tool. I think for most startup companies would agree that this is an essential tool for securing investments. When you enter into a due diligence process with any venture capitalist, for example, they will ask almost immediately, let me see your techno-economic assessment, let me see your techno-economic model, so they can really dig through it and understand if you are on the right track or if you're really understanding your business model properly. And one thing I really like to use techno-economic models for is to identify the pain points in a process. So identifying where the major cost drivers are. Examples could be some of your media inputs that you may not have thought, maybe you're using a very small quantity of a specific media input or process input, and may not be something that you thought was a big deal. But as you scale up, the quantity and the cost of this scales up so much that it's a major cost driver for your product. Another example would be energy costs, identifying potentially where there's extremely high energy costs so that you can manipulate or modify your process in some way, whether that's doing genetic engineering to address this point, such as operating your fermentation at a higher temperature to require less cooling, or modifying one of your process steps to basically reduce these costs. So what does a techno-economic model look like, and how do you do it? Well, there's a million different ways you can do a techno-economic model. One of the ways we've gone from a simple kind of Excel spreadsheet all the way to a full-fledged process model. And really, what does this look like if you have a full process model at the end of this? An example here at the bottom, I have just a kind of general overview of one of our production processes. And if we take something just as simple as the media formulation, when we actually go and model this process, what we do is we want to look at all of the inputs, all of the outputs in terms of energy, materials, mass balances for every individual process step. And it ends up looking something like this, where, even for just one simple media preparation step, we have all of these different inputs to model, all of these different outputs to model, and we have to put things like material properties, temperature, time, flow rates, all of that stuff. So it does become quite complex, but it really allows you to understand very deeply what your process will look like at the commercial scale. There's a few really good tools that I like. I mean, there's tons of tools out there for this type of work, but for process modeling, many people may be familiar with AspenTech software or SuperPro Designer by Intelligent. These are two products that we like to use simply because it translates very well from the techno-economic stage to actually using it for industrial design. So you can kind of keep on updating your models and your process so that you don't have to go through this entire process when you're ready to start talking about building a facility. So it kind of gets you a little bit ahead. And one of the last things that I'll talk about here is bioprocess scale up. And I think this has been a theme, especially today, the challenges in bioprocess scale up, especially within Canada. So what is it? Well, really, it's increasing production volume from bench to pilot and production scale. Typically, people like to go around a 10x volume increase when going from one stage to another. An example may be, going from a 20-liter reactor to a 1,000-liter pre-pilot to a 10,000-liter pilot stage, with a commercial facility having 100,000-liter reactors or larger. Now, what we've observed, and I think what's very common, is the utilization of contract manufacturing organizations for deploying capital light scale up and really demonstrating the commercial process. And as we've talked about a lot today, these contract manufacturing organizations are very important, especially getting over this valley of death, such that, it takes a lot of resources to build a commercial facility. We're talking about facilities that may be within, 50, 100, 200 million dollars, which is, unachievable for a lot of small startup companies. So being able to do a few runs at a contract manufacturing organization and demonstrate your commercial potential of your process can really help you cross this valley of death. But I think, unfortunately, in Canada, we don't really have a lot of manufacturing capacity. So what I've done, I've used a tool by Synonym called Capacitor just to map out all of the different contract manufacturing organizations here in Canada and the US. And in Canada, you can see that there's fewer than 10 manufacturing facilities with real large scale manufacturing. And here, a lot of them are even under 10,000 liters. When we compare this to the United States, in Northern California alone, there are more contract manufacturing organizations. So this is definitely an area that we need to develop further. I think Beth covered it really great, and Ali with the Vershuren Center and the cultivated bee. These are things that are needed within Canada, but the thing is, it's not enough. We need a lot more investment in this area, not only to secure Canadian startup potential and drive investment in Canadian companies, but also potentially to draw investment externally from other companies in other countries. And when we look at Europe, it's even more extreme, where most companies, especially Genesis included, when you go to Europe, the options are significantly higher. You have a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more opportunity. And this is something that we need to think about. How do we get to this level within Canada? And how do we build up this competency and build up this Canadian bioeconomy to be able to support all these companies? Because, doing things at the small scale is great, but unless you can scale it up, there's really no value in it. So just ending off here, a few things that I think are really important for developing the Canadian bioeconomy. First and foremost, we've touched on this a lot, support for startup companies. So funding opportunities for early stage startup companies, seed funds and the like, and especially business guidance for these small startup companies is really important, because oftentimes it's students coming out of school that have really great ideas, or young people with a lot of ambition that can really benefit from this business guidance. Next, technical and commercial support is quite important. Support from technical experts with experience in the field that have actually done this and have gone through the pain points can significantly accelerate development. And just guidance on how to scale processes, because I think this can allow companies to avoid a lot of the pitfalls in process scale up. And finally, like we've been mentioning all day, commercial manufacturing facilities. It's something that we desperately need within Canada. Pilot and commercial scale biotech CMOs are very important, from the 1,000 liter to the 50,000 liter scale. I think is kind of that sweet spot, and especially government funding for these different facilities. I think that's very important to have these facilities initially funded governmentally. Can be for profit, but I think the government needs to really play a big role in this to keep companies and talent within Canada. So thank you, everyone. I'm looking forward to the panel discussion, and yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Really appreciate your presentation and your conversation. So I'm going to ask, Kelsey, you're turning your camera on. Wayne, if you could turn yours on. I've got a number of questions lined up. So again, really appreciate all of your contributions today. I've got a couple of questions that I'll ask you individually, and then feel free to chime in on each other, and then a couple of common ones. So Wayne, the first one to you. You talked about the timelines and the short-sighted nature of investors. Is this not where government should be stepping in to de-risk with the patient capital, given the public market has little appetite for missteps and missed timelines? You're on mute.
Harley's on mute. Absolutely, they should be. However, to this point, they've not shown any more patience than a typical bank or investor. But nevertheless, that should be something. That should be a role they should be playing.
Anyone else care to chime in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's an area that we're in desperate need of, especially that early stage funding where the payback period is going to be a number of years, right? And commercialization may not be in sight. I think having patient government funding that can allow these companies to go at their own pace and access resources, especially, maybe not only funding, but access to resources and networks is really important.
Awesome. Kelsey?
Yeah, our DMT is a classic example of that. Thanks to the AFC funding for 5 years, we were able to take the technology to the certain level, but without further support, we'll be struggling to move this thing forward, right? So, and these technologies takes longer for development and longer time as well, and the customer takes longer time to adapt to these new products. So there's a longer duration period from bench scale to the commercial scale.
Right.
And government doesn't need to support these early stage companies to move from one stage to another stage. And private investors or the banks, they don't have the patience to go through that long duration projects. So
I saw a timeline on someone's presentation. This was a number of years ago, and it was a timeline and government investment and subsidies into the oil and gas sector over a period of, I think it was about 130 years, versus what the expectation is now. Very short timelines, very little cash, yet we have a history of doing this. Now it's a matter of not replicating. So along that same lines, Kelsey, this one's directed to you. If we already have an import market for the chemicals that you mentioned, what's the hurdle to displacing these fossil-based imports? What's the hurdle that we're running up against?
Again, it's the scale-up challenges because we are working with the bio-based materials, and still the technology is in the early stage of development. And on top of that, we need to be competitive. When we need to replace the import, we need to be price competitive with those products. And it takes time to because we are competing against mature technologies, how these products are made right now. And we are an early stage of development, so and that's the major hurdle. Need more R&D investment. Need some incentive for the Canadian corporation to buy low carbon Canadian made products, because I think there's a big potential for bio-based product to reduce greenhouse gases. So if the Canadian corporations, they get some incentive to purchase low carbon or carbon neutral products from Canadian made suppliers, it will really encourage more domestic production and help companies like DMT and other companies who are trying to make bio-based products in Canada.
Awesome. Anyone else want to chime in on that? I think you
Yeah,
covered it.
one of the things we need to face is that any of these purchases of bio alternatives, it's a discretionary purchase, whether it's at the consumer level because they think it's green, or even at the corporate level. You're asking them to replace a bio-based material, and you don't have the same cost structure as that existing structure. You have to prove the value proposition to them to make that change for higher cost. And let's face it, as much as any corporation talks about being green and responsible, they are still driven to their bottom line and to their shareholders. So you need to have a value add that is undeniable. And right now, unless there's some sort of incentive program to make up that difference in cost, it is always an uphill climb.
That green premium, right? So one of the other questions was, can these environmental attributes be monetized in these diverse markets?
Yeah, it's just again, you're trying to move along a path that an industry has 100 years of commercialization and driving down costs, and you're going head to head with that. Merely, I don't mean to discount it because we're all in this business, but merely on the green premium or the green principle that you have. And it's without some sort of incentive on the government to say, if you do this or you prove that you have a lower GHG reduction, you know, we'll give you I don't know, some sort of tax break, something to incentivize them. You know, until the government starts to say, well, we're not going to, I believe you spoke about this, certainly you and I did, about companies not being able to enter the European market unless you have a GHG reduction analysis. And that becomes the hurdle then that government put up to access the market. But we're not there yet in either the US or Canada. We're far from it.
Yeah, I would agree. This is something that we've seen as well, where you know, consumers say that they're willing to pay more for a green alternative, or let's say a compostable polymer versus a typical petroleum plastic. The reality is, you know, at the point of purchase, that's not necessarily the case. You know, when actually it's time to spend the money, and it is quite challenging to achieve cost parity because we're going against subsidized industries like the petroleum industry, coming from an area where there's essentially no subsidies at all, and there's large level of competition here. So yeah, I agree with Wayne said, if there's some way that we can, you know, allow green alternatives to have an advantage, or an advantage over what exists currently, I think that would go a long way.
How do you think government can support or encourage customers, corporations to increase that acceptance and that adoption? Like, are we looking at tax breaks? Are we looking at ITCs? Are we looking at more? Yeah. What do we put down as incentives from a government perspective or a citizen perspective?
Well, it can certainly be tax incentives. I mean, stepping outside of our bioeconomy, you know, one of our investments is life cycle, and we actually did a study. We, BIC, helped them with a study to look at where would be the best place to build their hydrometallurgical plant. And the three places we looked at were Kingston, where their initial operations were, Sarnia, and Rochester. And in terms of normal costs for CapEx and OpEx, Sarnia was the leader. However, the New York State government, because Rochester used to be Kodak and Kodak is no more, the New York State government poured enormous amounts of capital into them. And as a result, they started building their plant in Rochester. And that's the kind of assistance that I've seen in my career in a number of companies where I think state governments, for example, have more flexibility in these areas, but they offer, tax breaks, incentives on employment, et cetera, that encourage businesses to build there. And of course, what does that mean? It means that their total cost of production, of ownership of that technology is lower, and they can start to compete.
So my last question to the three of you, before I let you go, what are your top 3 hurdles to commercialization in Canada of biotechnology?
I'll let
Maybe
the
I can-
gentlemen that are in it answer first.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the main hurdles for commercializing these technologies is the facilities and the infrastructure. That's huge because it's a massive burden, and it's quite daunting to go and just build a new facility as a small startup company. And it's quite a large risk. So having facilities that we can get into, demonstrate commercial viability of our process, it really de-risks quite a bit, and it also attracts investment. So I would say that's one main thing. And I think that the increase of these number of facilities will also reduce the brain drain that we're seeing in Canada and in Ontario specifically. People are leaving, right? People are leaving to the States because there are more opportunities, more jobs, more facilities like this where manufacturing is happening. And if we can keep more of that within Canada, I think we will see an increase in the number of companies that are successfully commercializing the technology.
Kelsey?
I fully agree with Andrew. Lack of infrastructure is the main hurdle. For example, when we are trying to scale up our technology from bench scale to the pilot scale itself, it's a huge investment. But if we have a contract manufacturer who has a lab or a pilot scale lab, who has an equipment like a reactor or distillation or solvent extraction, if we can leverage that as a portion of the cost, that will not only speed up the scale-up process, it will reduce the amount of capital required for the scale-up of the technology. So infrastructure is number one. Second is the human resources, because we are trying to develop technologies which are new and unique, and we don't have the human resources to support that in terms of research scientists who have the expertise or the know-how in that space. So we are kind of training the new scientists and engineers on the job, which again extends the timeline of the project. Because we all make mistakes as we are learning the new technologies. So number 2 is the human resources. We do need that. And if we want to build on these technologies and bring the manufacturing back to Canada, we need to focus on the human resources and the talent we need here. And third, of course, is the funding, because early stage companies, it takes a huge investment to scale up these technologies. And the government do need to step in and support the early stage companies. And when we go through bench scale to the pilot to the commercial scale, as I said, it's a long duration and the high capital investment is there. And I don't think any private investors or the vendor and any other investors, private investors will be interested till you are commercial ready. And if you have a purchase order from the customer and your product is certified, yes, then you can have a private investor interested in scaling up. But before that, we do need government support.
Wayne, given that you're kind of very hands-on and you get embedded within these companies, would you say facilities, HR, and funding? Would you add anything else to that list?
Well, I'd say certainly facilities, everybody's on the same path, and I think that's absolutely right. Certainly seed capital, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to get past the seed stage. Yeah, HR mentoring, I think is important, it's an important aspect, but I think that in order, again, to reach the scale we need to, there needs to be some incentive for investors to invest at that large scale. The big capital that's going to be needed to build these plants. It's great to talk about, demonstration plants and pilot plants and things like that. You want to go into production, you want to build a bioamber type facility, it's a few $100 million, and there needs to be incentives for investors to put their money into that. That it just doesn't exist. Like I said, the mining industry used to have that for people who want to invest in a moose pasture. You know, that some development company has a moose pasture, some shiny rocks in it, and they want to develop the mine. Well, there were all kinds of incentives for people to take that risk in terms of writing off the investment in another part of your. I mean, there's no reason it couldn't be done in this market as well, if we really wanted to.
All right. Appreciate all of your time, all of your comments and answers to the questions. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap up. I'm going to thank you all for taking time to join us today, and thank you to our wonderful cadre of speakers from across the country and across the bioeconomy for sharing all of their technologies, ideas, and opportunities. We know how precious everyone's time is and appreciate that you all chose to spend it with us. So please help us continue to share the message. I like to say the bioeconomy is the economy, because that's what we have here in Canada. It's that simple. Without it, we don't have an economy. So we need to focus our collective national efforts on research, innovation, commercialization of technologies that are going to allow us to survive, thrive, and decarbonize. Lastly, I'd like to thank Kelly Forbes-Wilson, Andrea Hands, and Mehdi Sheikhzadeh, and Lambton College for taking the lead and making this great event happen. So signing off from the BioDesign team, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. Bye, folks. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Megan.